Oh, no.
I said, yeah, that's my wife.
And you
She
knew
said,
how to do it.
"Are you married?"
I was like totally.
All right, guys. Welcome to Ocean County. I know you guys are going to do virtual also, but I think we have maybe like 6 people here, so thank you. Welcome. Nick, the speaker is usually a couple minutes late, so we'll just fill up. Don't forget Tuesday, Monmouth County, we're at Brookdale, and I'm not in the office Monday to remind. So if somebody wants to take that on and just remind everybody, send an email out. We're at Brookdale on Tuesday. You know the classroom, same classroom, and meet there like 9:15. Anyone want to do that? All right. So yeah, send out a reminder because I guarantee if we don't, people are going to show up here. Here's the Wi-Fi for Ocean County people if you need it, and yeah, I mean, they say no coffee or food. If you have a covered cup, that's fine. And I said, Nick was like, no coffee, right? I said, you know what? The coffee police is out on maternity leave. I emailed back, yay.
Maybe it's help, the coffee helpers or the watch guards, they're all.
I know.
Long weekend.
Little moles. All right, so if you guys, you have your class on household insects next week with Sabrina. We had it Tuesday, so we had some helpline questions we'll go over. Flying ants on my wall, how do I know if it's a termite? What about
the same size.
yeah, something to me that's even more obvious. No? Yeah, I look for the pinched waist.
No waste.
Yeah, if it has a pinched waist, it's an ant. And it doesn't mean that it's a carpenter ant either. So, if they are seeing, here's a little quiz, if they are seeing sawdust, is it a termite?
No, tubes are.
Is it a termite or no?
No.
No. So termites ingest the wood and they make those tubes. Carpenter ants will ingest it and like spit it out, so you'll get the sawdust. But you could get that with like powder post beetles, carpenter bees also.
Don't they eat the termites, I thought she said?
What?
That the carpenter ants eat termites? Or did I hear that wrong?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I thought I read that.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
She said that.
Cool.
So if you have carpenter
Yeah.
ants, they'll eat.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, I never heard that.
For questions like that, is it appropriate to do things like ask them to send a photograph
Yes,
of it? And
absolutely.
like, do you automatically offer, like, I would offer to email them the fact sheet? I
Absolutely.
feel like that would be so helpful.
Yep.
And more helpful than me making a few suggestions, like,
Yeah.
much more comprehensive.
But if they're freaking out on the phone, just say, take a look at them, you see a pinched waist. If that is like, please send us a picture and we'll confirm.
Mhm.
And if it's an ant, especially from a picture, we are not gonna be able to identify which ant it is. But we have a book that has a whole key of just different types of ants. So we can kind of get close. If we can't, we send it, they have to send it into diagnostic lab. Is there anything I could treat for termites instead of hiring an exterminator?
Or against it.
Depends if it's in the water.
Don't even deal with it. You need to call in a professional. And they say, like, if the professional's telling you, your house is gonna fall down, you better, I better do this today. Get another one. They say there are 3 houses in New Jersey, those that had termites, those that have termites, those that will have termites. So it's like nothing to panic about,
Question like that, like, I feel like people will call asking and they'll make assumptions. So this person, do they even have termites?
Right.
Do you jump in and answer the question, or do you try to get them?
Usually they know that they have them. You get the swarm. I think Ocean County said they had swarms already, but I haven't heard of any swarms. This time of year we get the swarms.
Okay.
Sabrina had said if you found the tunnels and you were where you had termites, you could scrape them
Yeah.
and then see if
It could be.
defend the
Yeah.
and rebuild. If not.
Yeah, it's hard. don't know, I've never seen tunnels. I had termites in my other house and I never saw tunnels. I had a swarm. I freaked out. So carpet beetles or clothes moths, what would you say?
Lots of activity. Like the source.
Yeah,
Find the
find the
source.
source. And I am getting, like last week, I got 2 samples in of carpet beetles. And, you know, it was warm last week, or that weekend it was warm. And they're outside pollinating. They're outside flying around. And I think they were just coming in. It doesn't mean that there's an infestation if they see a couple. You know, my daughter's like, they're back in my room again. They're always by her window. And I think they're coming in. So it doesn't mean anything. And I don't know, I wasn't here if she mentioned it. I have noticed more reports of carpet beetles since that brown marmorated stink bug has been introduced. And I think like it's a predator of them. I think they're feeding on them.
Oh.
Or the brown marmorated stink bug, like they go into the attic and then they die. And I think they're feeding on them. And I had mentioned it to her and she agreed. So it's interesting. Because I used to never see them and I see them all the time now coming in the office. Moths around the kitchen, what are you gonna do?
Open up my door.
Find the source, throw everything out, clean it all down.
Make sure you vacuum the residue.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean, you know, you brought it in from the store, it doesn't mean you're dirty or anything. Everybody gets them now and then.
Oh, I had a terrible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it took me like a month to figure it out, because you'd open up the cabinet to get something to eat at night, like you're watching TV, you'd open up the cabinet, and then you'd see the
they're attracted to light.
like, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, it took me a while to say, wait, every time I open up a cabinet, there's a moth one.
Right, yeah, something's in there, yeah. Yeah. Everybody's got them at some point. I think I have bed bugs, what do I do? Why do you think you have them? Oh, I'm itching.
Go to doctor. Yeah.
I mean, she went over, I wasn't here the whole, but she went over, do not give medical advice.
Right, why did they call her medical, like the guy, the toilet thing, like why won't they do the urgent care? and say,
I had a pregnant woman with a tick in her hand crying at the counter.
Yes.
I'm like, because she thought she had Lyme, I'm like, go to your doctor, don't go here. So, I don't know. And you know what,
Maybe she just needed to hear that.
yeah. If they're itching and they think they're bit, we can't tell them anything until we have an insect sample, and that's all we can do is identify the insect. If it's an infestation, tell them how to control it. If they bring in a bed bug and you identify it, so then what?
And you can send them back.
I told you.
Yeah, just explain, you know, they could call in an exterminator. We have a fact sheet actually on some cool traps that professor from Rutgers invented. They,
Right?
Carbon
yeah, using the dry ice, because they're attracted to that. But you really need to call in a professional.
I was gonna say, for us, in the office, we've been getting, I'm Susan, if anybody didn't know.
Yes,
From the last round.
Susan, you remember from Ocean County, sorry,
Um,
sir.
we had a gentleman that's been coming in 3 times now with, itchy, itch. Nobody, but you were saying, why did they come there? Because nobody helps them. There is a problem. There's
Delusional
Not always.
parasitosis or.
So it could just be that, and then once they convince themselves they're itchy, and he's been bringing lint, but
Yeah.
oh my God, they're burrowing in my eye.
Yeah.
As soon as they say they're burrowing in somewhere, and you can't, so, I can say, well, what you brought in is not, yeah, but you can't tell them, there's like.
No.
No, I know, I'm just saying, it's a psychosis.
I have a good article for you to read, like, you know, and probably that, you know, please go to your dermatologist. Oh, I did, and they said it's nothing. Well, I can't do much more except for look at what you have. And all I can tell you is that I see no insect parts in it. And I had one guy, look, it's flashing, it's parking, don't you see it? It's parking.
Yeah.
It's sad, you know, people vacuum themselves into a corner at night and they'll only sleep like on that one chair at night. It's really sad.
I had
Like,
somebody
think
that
about
lint
how-
rolled themselves.
Yeah, think about how much you were itching just after her class, so times
Yeah.
100 or something. And some people, you know, I'm not a, sometimes I think I'm a psychologist. But, you know, they have a lot of things going on. There was this one young woman was coming in and she thought she was getting bit and she had rabbits and, but she had definitely something going on with the family dynamic there that her mother was telling me about. And she's like, I think that.
Manifest another reason.
Yeah, so like, please go to the doctor, yeah. Or can you look and see, you think this is a bed bug bite? I don't know. Don't lift the shirt, I don't wanna see it.
If we do that with
The
tick bites.
questions in your answers when doing the helpline?
Yeah,
You do?
yep,
Okay.
yeah,
All right.
yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
all right.
Not nursing.
No, I know.
Yeah, don't let them know you're in the medical field. I just found a spider, is it poisonous?
What does it look like?
Yeah, probably not, and, you know, if you scoop it up and put it outside, that's fine, it's not gonna hurt you.
It
So,
doesn't matter, it has 8 legs.
yeah.
gonna hurt you.
Right.
No, it's the same thing.
Yeah, I hate spider questions, because like Sabrina said, then they go around the house and every spider they see, they're blaming for their bite, and it could just be an outdoor bite or or allergy thing. All right, so one of our Ocean County Master Gardeners brought in this. So if somebody brought this in, what's your first question? What kind of tree? So this is an oak tree? Yeah, and what do you call that?
A gall.
A gall? And,
I tell them what it's from, and that freaks them out even more.
yeah, if you go down there, you see little holes? That's a little wasp. So this is called gouty, like gout, gouty oak gall. And, you know, like I was saying, we saw this like 10 years ago, a huge explosion. And then it kind of went down and now it's building up, but that didn't just happen, that's like 2 or 3 years in the making.
Okay, so they can come back.
And
You're the guy.
the wasp does it, and it's real tiny wasp. And it's yeah, no, it's real, and it's a very kind of complicated life cycle. But like that doesn't happen in a year, and the wasp doesn't make that. The wasp, by feeding on the tree and laying the eggs, like that's the tree's reaction to make all that. You feel how heavy it is?
Yeah.
So those holes are exit holes, so they've come out. And there's so, we know the life cycle, but you don't know the timing of it. So it doesn't make sense to spray because you can only spray when those wasps emerge, not when anything's in there. And we just don't know when that is. So it's gonna girdle that branch, they're gonna fall off because it's so heavy. And, or you could go in and cut them all out, but I don't know what else.
There's, in most cases, I haven't, at least with oaks, I haven't seen them. Do they only, is that only appear in oaks? That,
I believe so,
okay.
yeah.
I haven't seen it killed, I've seen it, you know,
Yeah,
it's the tree just lives with it.
yeah, and it grows, like, so think about if you prune a tree back, it's gonna sprout out from that point. So if that's all broken off at the end, it's gonna just sprout up from there. And usually it's on smaller branches. Then, I don't have a sample, but does anybody know what, black knot is? Does anyone have a purple leaf plum? Good.
Oh, really?
That's my second most hated tree.
Yes, it is.
We have a sample in the office.
Oh, cool, yeah, yeah. So, you know, everyone know that plant, they're flowering now, purple leaf plum, and everybody likes them because they have purple leaves. And they flower early, and it's like a whitish pink. So they are very susceptible to this fungal disease called black knot, and it actually forms not as big, but swellings on the branches that look like that, but it's not from an insect, it's fungal. And you know, purple leaf plum is one of those things that's just been planted, overplanted, monoculture. And this fungus is just taking over and it will kill that branch from that point out. And the branches are covered. It's not a tall tree, it's considered a small flowering tree. So there's no spray that you could spray. And you could go around and cut them out like 6 inches below the knot or the knot. But you have to disinfect the blade each time because otherwise and it's gonna come back. So I say, you know, if it's not that big of a tree, you may just want to replace it with something that's not in the cherry family. Cool, yeah, I'll leave it in here, it's kind of gross. But if you see it, I had some guy send me pictures and he goes, I have these spotted lanternfly egg masses all over my tree. I'm like, no, that's not what that is.
But wouldn't that be a case of having too much water if it had a fungus? No?
No, because this is air, this is a fungus that
okay.
spreads in the air. And it probably had it when they purchased it, or there's another close one. They say the way to avoid it is to keep your tree very healthy. I don't know. They all get it. I would never, ever plant a purple leaf plum. For that reason.
They're so pretty. Fungus spread to other plants.
Specific to cherry, and that's one guy yesterday, I answered his email. I need to know if it's gonna spread to all the other trees. So what would you say? Why? Right, so it only has a chance, definitely it's gonna spread to the purple leaf plums, but anything in the cherry family, it could in fact.
When you say cherry family, do you mean prunus?
Prunus family,
You just mean prunus?
yeah,
Not rose.
no, no,
We have a purple plum, we've had it like 25 years, but the goal.
oh, it's coming.
Sorry. No, we have them, but they're recent, I didn't notice them except the last couple of years, is this fungus more recent?
It's always been around, but I think as people plant them more and more, it's spreading more.
And the wet.
And
Okay,
we've
wet.
been, yeah, cool wet springs. And plums and the ornamental cherries, like, we call them 20-year trees.
Yes.
They don't live for long. So it usually takes something else coming in to really do them off. Otherwise, they just start to slowly decline. I had a man send in, you know, Kwanzaa cherry, it kind of goes like that. He sent in his pictures, oh, I want to save this tree. And
And one's like in Brielle Elementary School where I grew up in the home. They're 60 years old. I mean, they're.
is it a Kwanzaa?
Yeah.
Yeah, so they've been kept in really good shape. Yeah. Yeah. We had, who had that picture? Who just showed me the picture of the rotted one?
Oh, me.
Yeah. So, she had a tree taken down and there was like hollow areas of rot in it. And her arborist, the guy who cut it down,
He was an art, he said.
he told her it was from a bug. So she said, this is from an insect. I said, who knows? I mean, it's rotten. What kind of tree was
I
it?
don't know.
Okay.
Giant tree.
And it was dead or dying,
Yeah,
yeah.
it actually had the, that's brown. Yeah, all over my yard.
You're talking about the
So it
black
could have been
one?
an oak.
It could have been an oak.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't know.
but that was still that they sometimes weekends in my. That was.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it can, I guess, rarely.
Yeah, and you know, once there's rot in there, there's no cure for rot. And why it happened, who knows? But it does indicate the tree is declining or, you know, in decline and trying to think about the safety of it, which. Yeah. Yeah.
When I had oaks in my property and they were all over 200 years old. This was in Long Valley. And I had an oak tree that just fell over one calm May day, no breeze, lifted up the foundation of the house toward the kitchen, but the tree was hollow inside. And the people that came out and took care of it, they had to bring in like trucks from Pennsylvania. But the tree had a whole collar of that shelf mold that we just learned about. Because back then, they kept saying the only thing that killed that tree was the fall. But then I realized that whole.
I hope the tree doesn't fall
Beautiful cauliflower mold, I was taking pictures of it. It was all around it.
That shelf, it was shelf fungus.
Well, I don't know, it looked like a cauliflower.
Okay, well, that could have been like an
Yep.
question, but they'll tend to grow when, like, you'll see the shelf fungus when the tree is dying.
That's going on. But that was the point, the tree looked well, the arborists come in every other year, it's my insurance company covered all the damage because we had some arborists that I loved.
I don't know, log in.
We would have arborists come in and feed them and take care of them.
It eventually went on.
So
Maybe when.
was when I asked what caused the fall, the guy just said, but what caused the tree to die, he just said the fall. It never made sense until I saw
Well,
that.
my only point is that the fungus did not kill the tree.
No, it was a symptom.
It was a
Right.
symptom.
It was a symptom. But that's what but they didn't tell me that. I thought we just learned that. That's what I was saying. We just learned that. At the time, well, he probably wasn't a real artist. I mean, they came in and they would feed the trees, they really take care of them, all the others are there. But.
So.
Is it plugged in? So
I'm gonna turn it off and turn it on, because that kind of worked last time.
Did you try to turn it back on again?
that's what.
When in doubt, turn off and turn on.
I've got a bigger house.
All right, it's still, all right, unplug it. This has never done this. I don't know what the problem is.
It's raining.
Yeah. Like every. You can get it. All right, now plug it in.
Is it on a different HDMI? Like, is it on a different?
I don't know.
Come on, come on, come on. Do you have a projector?
Yeah. Try this. You know, something like that or no?
Yeah, but that's usually power.
There you go. There you go.
No, that just said.
Oh, that's that.
Oh,
That's
Yeah.
the page.
Make yours work?
I can't do, I have a camera.
It's weird, it's recognizing it, but it's not. Getting the signal. Jealous? There you go.
No, it'll come back. Come on. Are you kidding me? Oh.
We all sit in the front. In here.
Why?
Do you have a projector?
No, we'll try my computer.
Why, what was wrong with yours? I mean,
I don't know, maybe it's your.
well, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Same old trail.
I'd say I use mine, but then I don't know how to get it up there.
Technology. Oh.
Well, we're getting this now too.
I'll keep your old one, just, well, it's on the ceiling, right?
Well, I haven't also behind. Because everything was.
Never had, I guess strong winds, never had it fall down.
That's what.
I tried it.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. But you see how like.
I know my son.
But you need somebody on the front.
We're gonna do.
There you go, here, it's just, yeah.
So it's just me saying, hey, is anybody have the What windows is that?
Yeah.
This is, so maybe it's not.
Yeah.
And I might have done that, because you sent it to you.
Yes.
I don't know where.
I sent it as a PDF, so if you want to do the. It doesn't matter. I have a PowerPoint in there.
You're looking for jewelry.
Yeah, it's really nice, so. Here's another. Yeah.
And Nick, I know you usually do, but I am gonna ask if you can if somebody asks a question from in the back, that you repeat it. Because I don't have.
I don't know how to find it on
But yeah, they're really, they're very pretty. Yeah.
So for my master gardeners online, this will be recorded. But the screen is gonna be what you're gonna see on the camera. Did you update it? I might have last year's. Yeah, there you go. All right.
So the only thing you have to get is the plug in.
Oh, right.
We're good?
Yes.
All right, guys, we're gonna get going. Thank you for your patience.
They're used to it in my group.
There you go. It's me.
So what was the solution? Different computer.
Our speaker today is Nick Palanin, the chair of Natural Resource Department at Rutgers. He is an urban forester. And welcome, Nick. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have a remote too there.
Okay.
Sorry, guys.
Okay. Do I have to be tethered to the microphone? The online?
Yeah, but can you hear him? Yeah.
Well, you guys, I mean.
Yeah. They're hearing an echo, but I think it's because of the room, so I'm bringing it here in case you stand up front. So don't trip on any cords. I hate this system, but this is what I got.
Coffee.
New Jersey licensed tree expert.
Oh. So you just took away my first question.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Sorry, JS.
That's all right, that's all right. So urban forestry, how is that a thing? That sounds like an oxymoron. How do you do forestry in an urban setting?
Carefully.
Carefully. Yeah, good morning. So yeah, Nick Palanin, I've been with Extension 25, 26 years now. Came out of industry. So I was city forester in Jersey City for a couple of years. Then I was a IPM plant healthcare specialist for a tree company up in North Jersey, doing residential, commercial, municipal contracts and bids and landscape maintenance, like that arborist who comes to your property and assesses your trees and gives you a quote, and you have sticker shock. Then finished my master's at that time, and then in '99 joined Rutgers and been here ever since. Teaching master gardeners and the profession about urban and community forestry, arboriculture, which is the care of trees, just like horticulture, the care of plants, and the art of tree care and the lost art of tree care, and all the mistakes that we make out there about trees and tree care. So we can get into some of that today. Sorry for the delay. Strangely enough, my 30-minute trip took 60 minutes today. Yeah. So who knew that New Jersey was 40% under canopy cover?
That's great.
Yes.
Most people either in New Jersey or fly to New Jersey or in the region just know Turnpike and Parkway and Newark and, you know, the concrete jungles that we have, so to speak. But 40% under canopy cover. So when you think about whose trees did you drive past to get here today? Whose trees? Your town's trees, the county's trees, the stage trees, who manages those trees? And what do they mean by manage? How is that defined? How does your town manage your tree inventory, your tree resource? If you have a shade tree commission, that's a process by which they manage, but how do they manage? You know, do they end up, like some towns, wait for it to die and I'll take it down?
Yeah,
That
that's
may
my
be-
town.
Or wait until it falls down and I'll cut it up.
Or they let JCP.
So- Or JCP&L and PSC&G, yeah, exactly. So there's, you know, if we think about, if you put it into, so this class, this topic, is this toward the end of your training cycle?
Near the middle. One third the way.
Ocean, yes, Monmouth, no, okay. So this applies all the other topics, because you got to know about soils, you have to think about hardiness zones, you have to think about natives versus exotics, let's say, or introduced. You have to think about climate, because we're planting trees not for tomorrow, not for us, not for our kids, but supposedly for our grandkids. But in one of our, or even great grandkids, but in one of my soapbox topics is, has our longest lived perennial, the tree, now become our newest disposable annual? Does it matter that I plant the wrong tree in the wrong place incorrectly because I can just replace it?
It matters to me.
Well, it should matter to everybody, because and that's where municipalities and this 40% canopy cover, and you can see the whole eastern seaboard, especially down south where all the production forestry is that we have for pulp and paper. The amount of canopy cover, it's important for the livability of our cities and communities. Take the trees in your neighborhood, in your memory, take them out of the picture. What happens to property value? What happens to crime? What happens to stress and anxiety and depression? Our sense of wellness of being and our sense of space and place? So we put a lot of, we get a lot of extra benefits and value out of this woody perennial that towers over us. And yet we planted incorrectly. We're planting the same tree everywhere because we're hung up on this notion that there's this perfect urban tree. That's another one of my soapboxes. Is there a perfect urban tree?
No.
No, that question is false to begin with, because if it was a perfect urban tree, you would have the same tree planted everywhere. And then that's monoculture, and in comes a new disease or an insect, like Asian longhorn beetle, or like spongy moth, or new name, or emerald ash borer, or spotted lanternfly, or beech leaf disease now. So you plant the same thing everywhere, you're just inviting in nature or imports to then have your entire forest canopy under threat. Or if you're in the pine barrens, now you have southern pine beetle attacking pitch pine. And so the more diverse you can make your canopy in your town, especially in your town, because we don't have the natural system. Someone's got a lot of messages.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. You're
I'm
important.
turning it off.
Grandkid pictures, right? We have 2 million acres in forest and canopy cover in the state. The state of New Jersey tries to manage about 750,000 acres. The rest of that, 1.3 million acres, is in private hands. So how do we get these people, 120,000 different landowners, to actually manage their forests? And they could be little, postage stamp woodlots. Our woodland in New Jersey, from a forest standpoint, is so fragmented around the state, little bits and pieces and parcels. We have lots of edge, they call it, between forest and non-forested land. Lots of edge. Edge-dependent species like white-tailed deer love that. So the more edge we have, the more deer we have, the less predators we have, the less hunting we have, et cetera, whatever whatever mindset you have in that regard, that's where we have such a preponderance of population of white-tailed deer or other edge species, because just the way our forest is fragmented. And so we have farmland assessment, we have taxes, we have all these other benefits to get these people to manage their land, but most of them don't. But when you decide not to manage a resource, that's a management decision, and it comes with consequences. So you could have an over-mature forest, you could have a forest overrun with invasives or exotics, or in very poor health and in decline, because you decided not to manage it. It's like that old commercial, ignore your teeth, they'll go away. So ignore your woods. Now these woods, now in this setting, it's a woodland. Think about your community, your town, your county as a forest. And how is that forest managed? Do you have a lot of younger saplings coming up that are planted street side or in the park, and middle-aged trees that are doing really good? And then the over-mature or the declining trees that maybe are creating more habitat with hollows in the trees, but also are creating more risk because it's street side or it's in the park over a playground. And who manages that from a forest, a system standpoint? It's quote unquote easier to deal with individual trees as an arborist would. What's wrong with this tree? Identify, diagnostics, and what do you implement to deal with that? Whether it's fertilizing, spraying, or taking down, or pruning. It's much more difficult from a forester standpoint to then look at the whole system. And you may not be really, I shouldn't say not caring about, but you're not worried about an individual tree. You're thinking about the system as a whole, and stormwater management, and other issues that are much more broad in the community than just that individual tree that's raising a sidewalk and causing a tripping hazard. And that's the difference between an arborist. A city may hire an arborist for an individual tree versus a forester who's looking at the system. We have huge economic benefits from our forests, not just in New Jersey, but since we're in New Jersey, we're going to talk about Jersey. Recreation, ecosystem services, some consumptive services. There are some timber, firewood sales, things like that. 7,000 jobs. And then the intangible benefit, like our willingness to tax ourselves a little more to preserve land, to preserve that forest, whether it's green acres, blue acres, farmland preservation, historic preservation, etc. And I hopefully, I'm not sure if in the PDF I sent you, the links are live, but you can copy and paste the links and get more information on all these, this data and more that I'm sharing. But look at the benefits from an urban forest. Well, you guys have it printed out. Any questions? The value, the benefits we get from these trees, and maybe the trees are not valued as greatly as they should because people take trees for granted. Most of my clients, when I was in the industry, never knew the tree was in decline or dying or was a problem with storm damage until there was something falling on the ground in front of them, and they're coming out of their house, they're coming out of their driveway, and it's blocking their path or interrupting, their process of leaving for work or the store or whatever. And so, oh, the tree just died. It's like, no, it's been struggling for years. You just don't know to look up. And part of my talk is about learning to look up. Most people see from eye height down. Rarely do we. So if you're driving along, you see a big tree in the distance. Wow, what a great tree. But as you get closer and closer, you notice the signage underneath, the store, all those other things that are lower. So there's a lot of people noticing their lawn and their shrubs and their mulch, and then the base of the tree. And they never look up to say, okay, how is it doing? But from all of these benefits, I mean, even making our communities more livable, lower incidence of violent crime, even a shorter hospital stay. They did studies where, we don't have a window in this room, but if there was a window in this room and it looked out over a garden or a landscape or trees, people had shorter post-op stays in those rooms versus ones that looked out over a roof or a parking lot or something that was devoid of plants. And then increased business value, home value, the heat island effect. It's going to be more and more of a reality as in 30 to 50 years, our climate may be more like North Carolina. So then at that point, our winter hardiness will be a different discussion. Our chilling hours for certain plants will be a different discussion. I might not see it, but it's coming. And if we're planting trees for the future, 50 years from now, what are we planting? Maybe more live oak, maybe more of the southern, quote unquote, southern trees, because our northern trees, their native range may move further north. And so things like red oak or pin oak may not be as native as they once were here, just because of climate change. Yes.
You have listed here lowers incidence of asthma. How do trees lower that? Because some people would think, oh, the pollen or whatever would increase asthma, so.
Right, well, there's so many, well, depending on the types of trees you have and the leaf surface that can catch the dust and hold it. And this was all taken off the Southern Forest website. So they may have the data and the research that goes with the benefits. Because there are some trees like, anyone familiar with London plane tree?
Yeah.
What?
Sycamore.
Sycamore, it's a cousin to the sycamore, but that is one of those trees that you don't want to work on in the spring. Because there's so much dust and pollen on the branches and on the leaves that as you prune it and cut it and chip it up, if you're not wearing an N95 or something better, it's going to choke you, it's going to choke your chipper, there's so much pollen and dust on it. But that doesn't mean it's not a good urban tree. That just means you need to know when to work on it to avoid those kinds of problems. So take this single tree out of the picture. And how did that tree survive between curb and sidewalk?
Power lines.
Especially power lines right through it. It's topped. I don't know if you can notice on the photo, maybe in the printout. Does the tree have a center leader? No. That was topped out to provide space for the wires. And the tree continued a canopy all around it. It's an oak, so it's marvelously resilient in that space, filling between curb and sidewalk, right next to a driveway. Think about that list of benefits and how this one tree is impacting the neighborhood. Just I saw a reel this morning on my phone about never losing the sense of awe. And you see this in a neighborhood and it's like, how did it happen? This is fantastic, it happened. How long is it going to maintain itself? Or how long are we going to allow it to stay there? And what happens when it goes? How does that impact that neighborhood? And how many years, decades will it take for a replanted tree to actually fill the space?
There's one behind it too.
What's that?
There's one behind it.
There's one behind it down the street a little bit and then across behind the houses. So think about the positives. But now think about you're the owner of any one of those homes within striking distance of that tree. What is your tolerance for risk? I mean, you drove on New Jersey streets this morning, so that's your risk tolerance is pretty high.
True.
But think about, I had so many clients the day before a storm, the day after a storm. Nothing planned before or after that. It was always right around bookends around a storm that I need a price to take this tree down. Because my bedroom's right there, I was like, there's nothing wrong with the tree, but their perception is now I'm under risk. And I don't want to deal with that risk and the anxiety, take the tree down. Oh, it's $5,000? Okay, I'll get back to you. I'll swallow my risk and I'll just, deal with it. But, because tree removals are incredibly expensive,
What makes it expensive?
time and money.
Hard.
I mean, it's time and effort, it's hard, if I have to bring a crane in,
Yeah.
equipment, I mean, the crane alone and the operator is gonna be about $1,800 for that day.
You don't want it to hit anything when you're taking it down.
By all means, you don't want it.
We just had a neighbor take down 2 oaks and they had a crane.
They were huge.
They were humongous.
Huge. They put the trunk on a huge flatbed
Mhm.
for milling, or,
Yeah.
they'll slab it.
Yes, yeah, well, and that's, when milling or taking lumber like this to a sawmill, especially with a street side tree. A lot of mills won't accept that because there's no known, what's inside the tree.
Right.
There can be nails, bullets, did you say?
Where do you live?
South,
right.
they have that.
Down South Jersey?
No, yeah, North Carolina.
Okay, but chain link fence,
Yeah.
how many trees you see grow into a chain link fence, you consume it
Yeah.
over decades, and now it's gone, or a rock or something, and the last thing a sawmill wants is when a piece of lumber comes through and it hits metal or concrete. And then that destroys the entire sawmill system. But you're talking about hollows in trees. Years ago, decades ago, the process was just like a tooth. If you had a cavity in your tooth, you filled it. So I have a cavity in my tree, I fill it
Yeah.
with concrete.
Oh,
The Basking Ridge oak that came down, 4 or 5 years ago? It finally died after 600 years or so of life. But back in the 20s, it was filled with tons of concrete and reinforcing metal bars to keep it in place. So if you don't know that, and you start cutting in even with a chainsaw, hitting concrete, hitting metal, it explodes the chainsaw. It's gonna, the risk and insurance to the guy who's cutting. I mean, again, that drives the price up of tree work. Sorry, there was a question in the back.
Last summer, I had a tree company come in and survey my property, and they looked at my oak and said, oh, we're gonna elevate that. I had never heard that before. And are you doing that?
Yes, I am.
So what's your feeling on that?
So the question was about elevating, was it a pin oak or just an oak in general?
Close to that size.
Close to this size, elevate. So years ago, there's national pruning standards. And years ago, when I was in the industry, it was class 1, 2, 3, or 4 pruning. Which no one knows what that is. If you're a consumer and I'm gonna do a class 2 pruning, okay. What is that? So now it's crown raising or elevating, so they take the lower branches off, crown thinning, hazard reduction. So it's more common sense, regular language that you can know what your tree care company is doing to your trees. So you don't come home and get, really surprised at the amount of lumber they took out of the tree or where they pruned it. So crown raising or crown elevation is the lower branches. And if it is a pin oak, a lot of pin oak, it almost grows like a regular tree with like a skirt on the bottom. The virgin pin oaks, you can tell that they were never pruned because there's still these lower branches that grow toward the ground while the rest of the canopy is growing up. And those usually are, when you elevate, you would take off those lower branches. More head height, more traffic height, truck height, whatever was needed for the base of that bottom half of that tree.
Is there an easy way to know like the age of the tree and then to be able to say, for a community to say, okay, like we have a lot of old sycamores in our town, or just like not a lot of trees, but a lot of bigger trees, and say, this should be saved, or this is this type of tree, so it could live another 200 years or whatever, like to try and preserve older trees.
So the question was about easy way to determine how old trees are, and that's usually without cutting them down, because once they're dead and cut down, you can count the rings. Sadly, the Forest Service did just that back in the 50s. They had 2 giant sequoias out west One was named Prometheus and one was Methuselah. So I guess they drew straws and cut one of them down to count the rings and find that it was like 5,000 years old.
Oh my gosh.
Now, you can do increment bores into the tree itself and take out a slice, a little like a core sample, and then count the rings after you stain it. There is also a formula by which you measure the circumference of the tree, and based on the species of the tree, there's a multiplying factor, and you can get within 5 or 10 years of the age of the tree. That's a messy type of way, but it's better than cutting it down.
Yeah.
And even with an increment bore, you're still injuring the tree in order to determine its age. So I'm gonna cut into you to see how old you are. As opposed to, but if you know, like younger communities, when I say younger, like in the last 50 years, they were all, a lot of them were totally deforested. The development goes in and then they plant trees. So you know all those trees are probably on site 50, 60 years, 40 years, something like that. And even if you add another 10 to 15 years for the production in the nursery, you're still at around 60 to 70. But if there's bigger trees that were left behind or ones that are doing better than others, especially, and we can get into it toward the end of the talk, we talk about big and champion trees. Every town may have one, the state has a list. You may want to start one in your own community to just get a better awareness and appreciation of big trees in the neighborhood. And then get some behind that thought would also be then there'll be some protection or some sort of additional watchful eyes on the condition of that tree. Yes, ma'am.
Would crown elevating help slow the progress of some diseases? Like if you had both diseases?
Most diseases
affect the bottom branches first.
Some do, so the question was, will crown elevation slow down some diseases in trees? And so like with hemlock woolly adelgid, as an example, with hemlock trees, they do very well where there's higher humidity. And most of that is in the lower branches first. Cytospora canker on blue spruce, again, high humidity, lower branches get infected first, and then it moves up the tree. But so sometimes it's just managing the humidity, maybe not removing all the branches, but watching how the irrigation system hits the base of the tree and keeps it moist longer than it should, or it's not in full sun anymore, so there's more, the moisture lasts longer in that area. A lot of the other deciduous trees, those foliar diseases are also spread by insect activity. So even though you're dealing with the humidity or pruning off the lower branches, you've got leaf hoppers and plant hoppers and such spreading that disease as well, like with bacterial leaf scorch, or it's within the xylem of the tree itself, spreading from tree to tree. So it's not a short, clear-cut way, pardon the pun, to control diseases by crown elevation. But at the same time, when you're planting, you want to plant with the mature size in mind. How many places you see planted and the shrubs are already touching each other at installation? So they'll never be able to mature out. And so you're filling the space with more plants, but not allowing those plants to then mature out to the right size. So if you're planting the Colorado blue spruce, which is supposed to mature at 60 feet tall by 30 feet wide, why are you planting it within 5 feet of a wall? And that's where my soapbox is that now a disposable annual? When it starts to grow and touch the siding, well, we're gonna take it out, we'll replace it. It's like, well, you're just doing it for color then, you're not really doing it for the tree itself. This town decided to do a different version of monoculture. This is a mile-long road that used to have a trolley between all from one end to another. So they had covered it years ago, decades ago, with a tree island after they took the rails out. And initially there were huge trees planted within that strip. So the entire road was literally covered in shade all summer long. As those trees aged out, they took them all down, and they were a mix of London plane and maple and some oak. Well, instead, they went like 3 or 4 islands full of Japanese tree lilac, then 3 or 4 islands of Bradford Callery pear, then 3 or 4 islands of ash, then 3 or 4 islands of cherry. So it had this checkerboard look down the street. But they're all in blocks of monoculture, not intermixed. And so Emerald Ash Borer came in and took care of the ash trees. Callery pear take care of themselves, they fall apart. So thank you very much. The cherries are hanging on for dear life, and so are these guys, because the problem with urban forestry in the sustainability discussion is, when does the maintenance crew show up? Who's maintaining these trees? Or are they literally on their own after the first 2 years of planting? And you hope you get the best of what you can get out of it. You know, everyone talks about, and there's nothing wrong about Arbor Day and the big, gold shovel photo ops for all the elected officials and such, and everyone's planting new trees. But who's maintaining those trees to get them beyond early to midlife? And that's where, and then on the other side of the spectrum is everyone's worried about how many trees I have to take down because of bacterial leaf scorch or emerald ash borer, or just they're just aging out, and nothing's been done over these years to sort of like repopulate the forest. And then we have these. Think about that list of benefits we just had, but think about the background of this, or the back. Yeah, see the background there with the big pin oaks? Of course, that's solid pin oak, so that's all bacterial leaf scorch now. And now we got this. Why do we do this? I mean, there are benefits, and well, is it really softening the look of the hardscape that we created?
I mean, it's pretty.
It's pretty, it's green, but look at the second tree in the background. Maybe you can't see it on the screen. But see how off color it is?
Yeah.
It's very chlorotic, very light green compared to the one in the foreground. So right away, was the soil ever protected on a construction site for it to actually support plant life? They scrape off the topsoil and then they compact it like crazy because of all the engineering needed for our roads and our sidewalks and our buildings and our trucks and our cars and stuff. And then we dig a hole. Well, we try to poke a hole in that really compacted soil and put a tree in it and hope it does well. And those trees, then why do you think we have pin oak planted all over the place as much as we do? It can withstand those poor draining soils that we've now created because of our construction. It's a native plant that does well in a swampy, poorly drained area. Well, what do you have between curb and sidewalk but poorly drained, I'll say soil, could just be dirt. We don't really, and then how will it spread out to support itself with its roots with all the other underground utilities in competition?
But isn't that the right type of tree to plant in that environment like that? You wouldn't plant a pin oak there. You plant the.
No, you wouldn't plant a pin oak, and you wouldn't want to plant anything vase shaped,
Right.
because it's going to get whacked by all the cars and trucks or hit the buildings. So yes, columnar varieties, nice and tight and vertical, that makes sense. But my question would be then, does it really make sense to design a space like that requires a columnar tree? Because where's the shade coming from? Where's the benefit? Where's the, you have to stand around it, as that little line of shade goes around. Or maybe there's no direct shade because the buildings around it are 3 stories tall. So now you've got this wind tunnel effect, which then puts more stress on the tree. But for places like New York City that say, hey, we are happy if we get 7 to 10 years out of a newly planted tree. Okay, well, not every place is New York City, and maybe not every place like Times Square, maybe there shouldn't be a tree there. But, in other spots of our suburbia, we should be thinking a little bit better about what it's gonna look like afterward, and how it's gonna benefit, what stormwater infiltration or stormwater capture is that tree gonna do as it's growing straight up? Not much at all compared to those big pin oaks or the London planes or the sycamores or any of those other bigger trees that can capture and slow down the rainfall before it hits the pavement. And then runs off very quickly and causes, we have more flooding and more stormwater management issues. And then we try to we're going to surround ourselves with nature, but I'm not gonna buy a fence. I'm just gonna buy lots and lots of arborvitae and plant them right next to each other. And so we're demanding even more services from a living plant. But how much browning will this homeowner tolerate? Or will they hire, like in a drought, there were lawn care companies selling spray painting your lawn green. You couldn't water it, but you had the greenest lawn in the neighborhood. We put so many more demands on a living plant that's going to have ebbs and flows and how it grows and and now you've got all this competition amongst the group between each other. And so, yeah, I know he's right along the road and it's spent a lot of money to get this thing planted. How sustainable is that? If you're doing it even from an investment standpoint, let alone from a plant standpoint. So as we talk about anatomy and physiology of trees, what's wrong with this depiction?
How deep the roots are?
What about how deep the roots are?
They're too deep.
They're too deep. And do they stop at the drip line of the tree, the edge of the canopy? No, they're spread out. Yeah, so they're, if you looked ahead on your handout, that's what it would look like. When you see a big tree blow over, how deep is that hole? Not very. It's hugely wide, right?
Yeah.
Most trees in good growing condition, the roots will spread out 2 to 3 times the height of the tree. There are some trees, though, that do have more of a taproot than others, so they will have a little bit of a deeper taproot, walnuts, hickories, etc. But for the most part, like a spruce tree blown over, they have this big pad of roots, 2 to 3 times its height, holding it in place.
Is that the same as 50% bigger than the canopy?
50% bigger than the, no, it would be 100% bigger than the canopy.
Because I think in our.
2 to 3 times. Now,
50% bigger, yeah.
we're talking in optimum growing conditions.
Right.
So a park, a golf course, maybe, something that's not street side.
Right.
But yeah,
It's just the confusion is in the book, it said 50% bigger than the tree canopy. So I'm just trying to figure out.
What to go by.
Yeah, thank you.
well, it's at least 50% bigger than the canopy, but it could be up to 100%.
So between 50 and 100, okay.
Right. So you have a big tree in your backyard, or your neighbor has a tree in their backyard, those roots are in your yard, or your roots are in their yard.
Right.
They decide to put an in-ground pool. They decide to put an addition on the house. Those roots are going to be impacted, even if they're only the finer root hairs out there getting moisture and nutrients, not the bigger roots near the base of the tree.
So the first diagram you showed is sort of only a few trees? or
Correct.
something like
That have a taproot.
Okay.
Yes, most of them, the common ones you're gonna deal with on a regular basis with homeowners or in your own yard or in your town are gonna be more like this. Now, that's when the soil is not compacted. Most trees' roots are in the bottom, or in the top, 18 to 22 inches of soil. They're not that deep, but they are spread out far and wide. And all trees, sorry, no, I'm good. You should see a flare as they go into the ground.
Right.
If you do not see a flare and the tree is going straight into the ground, it was either planted too deeply, it's been over mulched, or there's something girdling the tree that is preventing it from having that flare. The only things going straight into the ground should be utility poles, fence posts, mailbox posts, things like that. Trees should have a nice wider flare. We refer to it as a buttress root system as it goes into the ground. But if you have a compacted soil, poorly drained soil, heavy clay soil, then instead of these roots being 18 to 22 inches deep, they're all in the top 6 to 8 inches.
Wow.
Because why?
You can't penetrate.
Well, they can't penetrate, but what's up here?
Oxygen.
Yes, right. You've got pore space that's lessened, but you have all the oxygen is up here, not down there. So those tree roots will stay near the surface, and most homeowners then complain as the tree ages that these roots start bulging up out of the ground, and they're ruining my lawnmower, and they're ruining my, et cetera, or tripping over it. Because those roots are near the surface because of the lack of oxygen down lower, and tree roots grow in diameter just as above ground parts do. So it's not that the tree is being uprooted, but the top of the root is actually bulging out from the soil surface because it's growing in diameter. Question in the back.
Yeah, some of my neighbors have these little, like, 2-foot high berms around the tree with. I wanna knock on the wood.
It's common.
It's incredibly common.
Can you just repeat that, because I know they.
Oh, yeah, so the question, more of a statement that your neighbor has mounds around the base of each tree, and then they're planted either, or they're maybe wood or stone holding that mound in place, and then it's planted in other perennials or annuals or something.
Yeah, and so isn't that sort of cutting off what the tree would naturally do?
So is it cutting off what the tree would naturally do? Well, yes, if we can get into that in a little bit, but yes. Yeah, short answer is yes. We'll get into more detail about that a little bit later. Yeah, yes, there and then there.
If the roots are compacted and they're close to the surface, is there anything that you can do, like, I don't know, pitchfork drilling something?
Yes, you can. So the question was, if the roots are near the surface, can you aerate the soil to get the oxygen down where you want the tree roots to be? The answer is yes, but it's very time and labor intensive. With a soil auger, you can drill down 12, 18 inches, poke holes in the ground to oxygenate the soil down low, and then maybe fill it with pea gravel or something so it stays a source for oxygen. But by the time you're seeing the roots breaking the surface, it's almost too late for that. But if you know you have poor soil to begin with, when you're digging the hole, planting a new tree, just like you core aerate maybe every other year with your lawn, or your lawn service does that, you can core aerate for your trees. You just want to mark out first, call 811 and get your utility markouts, so you're not puncturing a gas line or an electrical line. The results of that are usually not good. So an 811 is a free service for any time you're breaking your soil surface. Even if you know where the utilities are, you can always, usually the markout is good for 30 days.
Aren't there some trees though that have shallow roots?
Oh, yes. There are lots of trees that are always shallow rooted no matter where they grow. Silver maple is one, beech tree is another, sweet gum. Those are shallow rooted to begin with. But sweet gum, like pin oak, does really well in a wet area, poorly drained soils, heavy clay soils. What's the downside of sweet gum?
The balls.
The balls.
I have 3 of them.
Only 3 balls? 3 sweet gum.
No balls.
So there are now, so with urban forestry, right? So there are now available fruitless varieties of sweet gum, of a lot of different trees. So then they say, well, because sweet gum outside of the nuisance fruit, and we throw the word nuisance in front of the fruit because
It is.
it's a nuisance to us. But the fruitless varieties, you know, that sweet gum still has, now, instead of the pointed leaf edge, it has a rounded leaf edge, but it's still got the 5 lobes, still got great fall color. It doesn't, hardly any insect or disease issues. It's just no fruit. So then the pendulum swings, let's just plant fruitless varieties in our urban landscape. What's the result of that?
Well, fewer species live there, you know, you don't get the birds.
You don't get the birds. I mean, there's so many other things besides us that wouldn't put the word nuisance in front of fruit. Like, remember mulberry trees? And nuisance fruit because it was staining the sidewalk, because it's staining the sidewalk. Why did you have a sidewalk there? Why'd you put the mulberry there? But whatever. But a fruitless variety, then what's habitat, what's food for everything else? Because everything's connected to everything else, and especially even in our man-made landscapes.
What does eat those, I call them itchy balls?
Everyone's called them itchy balls.
What,
The birds eat the seeds. Like
Right.
I've seen
In
my
chickadees. Well, maybe you don't.
I have these hard.
Well, if you had your choice,
They don't eat that outer,
no,
thing that's carrying the seeds.
correct.
If you shake the ball, there will be these tiny, tiny seeds in it.
Right.
And those are what a bird will hang on and get those seeds out of the little ball,
Then
like
True.
chickadees.
True, yeah. But you rarely see that, because when you think about the buffet table that is our urban forest, too much, am I gonna eat a cherry? If am I going for prime rib or liver?
Are you talking
You know,
about,
or whatever, or
are you talking about the birds opting for different fruit?
possibly.
Well,
I mean, easier to eat, maybe more nutritious,
I mean,
maybe,
but some birds are going to eat those
yes,
seeds.
yes.
And it will be important to them. They will not go to the
I-
cherries or the mulberries.
No, it's just that there's one healthy sweet gum will produce so much of that.
It does, no kidding.
And
It's 14 of us in my yard.
I think you have in the class this sweet gum encounter group that should meet on Tuesdays.
Sorry.
No worries, no worries, no worries.
Colin.
Recover. Oh, yeah, pollen. But that's where you had your soils talk, right?
No, you didn't.
We did.
Okay. So you can impress your soil presenter when they talk about soil compaction. And, you know, if you've got the same number of soil particles and the same amount of water, but you don't have the pore space, you don't have the oxygen that is needed for proper root development, so they'll stay near the surface where there's more oxygen, or at least the water will drain out and there'll be more availability of oxygen in those soil pores.
But there was a question online, sorry, even though roots are growing up and out and it is too late, the tree would still benefit. That question is, will the tree still benefit from air holes to be healthy?
Yes, most definitely.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
On the soil compaction, I recently had my pool removed and I looked outside and the guy's going around and his machine and it's like concrete now. And what I saw online was a soil, like liquid you pour in a soil to make it like loose or something. Have you ever heard of that?
I don't know why it would do that.
I don't know why either. I'm a little hesitant to.
I'm very hesitant.
Yeah.
Just because it's online doesn't.
What is it?
True.
Yeah. What the heck?
We're gonna go with that baseline first.
Yeah.
So.
It's on Amazon.
Oh, well.
I mean, it's a sold product that people buy.
Sign me up.
5 stars?
Reviewed by one person, 5 stars. There's so many ways, so many good ways to prevent soil compaction. Once you get it, it's so difficult to undo the damage.
Yeah.
So in your instance, I'll use another example. Drew University in Morris County, they had a big construction going in with a whole new building, addition, and right nearby were 3 huge copper beech trees. And if you know that campus or any college campus, there's some big trees everywhere you can look or find. And so they went so far as to put chain link fence with concrete bases around those trees well beyond their drip line that kept all trucks, all equipment, all the deliveries of cinder blocks and concrete, whatever, out from under those trees. The building got done, and those trees now look like the building and them have been together for decades because they avoided that compaction. I've seen other construction sites, especially around the turnpike, not to pick on New Jersey State, but any place, really, I've seen it, where you have that orange plastic fence around the tree.
Right.
And it's out beyond the drip line. 3 weeks into the construction site, that's moved a little closer.
Yeah.
And a little closer. And then by the time the construction is done, it's wrapped around the trunk of the tree. Why bother? You've already compacted the soil and the tree dies within 3 to 5 years. I segue to what we used to call dead tree farms. You go to any new development and 5, 7 years after construction and installation of the starter castle or the McMansion, you've got dead trees. And you're talking about a place of tree care. Now I got to bring in a crane. I can't put a person in the tree with a rope and saddle and a chainsaw because their weight alone could bring that whole tree down. Because what we have here now is standing firewood. The bark is off the tree to the point that there's levels of deadness, if you will, in a tree. And pin oak and other oaks can hold their dead wood for years. And then on a nice calm day, that wood will finally fall off because it took a while for it to dry out. Other trees, when they die, like ash, they get very brittle, very dry, very quickly. And not that this is an ash, but in this instance, I have to now bring in a crane or a bucket truck and slowly lower that. So you don't want pieces being felled and then splinter into a bazillion different directions and possibly hit, property, car, whatever. But knowing how to protect the tree and what they used to call the canopy underground. So if you think about the canopy above ground that everyone enjoys, think about the same kind of canopy below ground, just not as deep, but spread out wide. And that you can protect your root system from this compaction damage. They did a study at the Morton Arboretum about how new trees establish themselves under properly managed mulch, and I will always say properly managed mulch versus grass, and how grass is a great competitor for that young tree to get established in your yard. Now, what does established mean? How long does it take a plant to get established in your yard?
It depends on the plant.
It depends on the plant, good answer, but yes, you're right.
Yeah. I mean, if you
How-
a tree,
How does it, when do you know a tree is established?
In our town, the state has us watering the trees up to 3 years after, 2 years after planted, weekly watering with 20 gallons, 15-gallon bags, and then on the 3rd year fertilization. So that's that's the guidelines for us for our grant.
Okay, so they're saying 3 years.
3 years with specific tree.
Right. So horticulturally, it would be when the roots come out of that original bag, tree, root ball, container, and get into your parent soil. How long does it take that plant to do that? For some shrubs and small plants, it may take a couple weeks. For trees, it may take a year or 2 or 3 to get out of that root ball and into your parent soil, and then it's established.
What about bare roots?
what about what?
Bare root would establish quicker because it's, hopefully with bare root these days, you can get a much larger tree that's bare root. And they ship it without the soil. So it's much easier to get cross country without paying a lot of freight. And then you can establish it. It's just you're digging a much bigger hole to lay out those roots as they should be in the ground. You're not gonna twirl it around or fit it into a small hole. So most of the roots, I mean, Arbor Day Foundation sends you those 10 little whips if you join. I tell them to keep them. I don't need to have 9 of them die in my yard or in my pots. But yeah, that's the bare root would establish quicker if they're planted correctly. There's always that if planted correctly. So under properly managed mulch, you get that establishment, you get that the lack of competition with turf, because if you're watering or fertilizing your turf is going to hold all that it can and then some, especially if it's got heavy thatch. And it's never going to get beyond the turf or the grass roots to get down where the roots of the tree are. So that's why a lot of times you'll see tree care companies coming with almost looks like a needle, and they're injecting it into the soil under pressure beyond the turf, so they can deliver the fertilizer or the watering right to the tree's roots where the tree roots are, instead of broadcasting on top and waiting for it to trickle through if it can get through. But that's why you see around the base of a young tree, there's no turf. There's this circle around it with then mulch over the top. And why do we mulch?
To hold in moisture.
Hold the moisture.
People do for aesthetics.
Oh. So I'll get back to the aesthetic part.
To keep those darn weed whackers.
Oh, yeah, so keep the mechanical damage away from the base of the tree. But what do we do? But what do we do instead? We put mulch against the base of the tree as opposed to leaving it more like a donut around the tree. It shouldn't be touching the tree itself. Because you have mechanical damage, but you can also end up with rot and decay damage because you've got the wet mulch right up against the base of a young tree. So here in Hillsborough, we're doing work on some properties, and we noticed that all these trees, where's the flare?
Underground.
There is none. Well, we take an air spade, he's got a compressor in the van, and you literally can blow the soil off the roots without damaging the roots. As opposed to using a shovel or a backhoe or something that's going to get mechanical injury, we can literally use forced air, blow off the roots, the soil. Oh, there's the flare.
So it's buried too deep.
It's buried too deep. It was planted too deep. Now, do people plant trees deep on purpose?
They don't know better.
Right. Most of us don't know better, because the old rule of thumb used to be the top of the root ball or the top of the container was your finished grade. You're supposed to match. But what does that assume?
That's right.
That it's the right height in the container or the right height in the ball. So if you're buying it in a root ball and it's already too deep in the ball, you're just matching it and it's too deep.
Especially grafting dwarfs.
Grafting dwarfs, etc. I mean, you have to find where that flare is. So when you're buying it, and even in a containerized, a pot, you want to dig down and find where the flare is. And then from that flare to the bottom of the container or the bottom of the ball is how deep you dig your hole. So you can get that thing lifted back up to where it should be, so you see the flare. Now, I've had discussions with landscapers who say, well, there's this, I don't know why it has to rhyme, but plant it low, it'll never grow, so plant it high, it'll never die. So I'm not going to check where the root flare is. I'm just going to assume it's too deep in the ball. So I'll just plant the ball high. And then I put mulch on. So you think it's over mulched when in fact the ball is half out of the ground. And they never took the time to take the wrap off and the burlap off and find where the flare actually is to plant it correctly. They're just, so we're replacing one assumption with another assumption. So instead of assuming it's the right height, I'm just going to assume it's the wrong height and I'll plant it 6 inches high. Well, maybe you could still be wrong. Why not spend 5 minutes? Well, time is money, but to take the top of the flare, find where the flare is in the top of the root ball or top of the container. And that would be where you're planting it the best. Roots also will girdle themselves. Trees will cut themselves off. Norway maple in particular is a great example. It is genetically prone to have a girdling root. And they did research on saplings where you cut the girdling root off and a new girdling root forms. It's just part of, at 60 years of age, it starts choking itself off because the roots grew in a circle and everything's, growing in diameter and choking itself off. And so you'll see a dead section of a Norway maple bark on the lower part of the trunk as it starts to decline and die from just literally choking itself off. So it's built-in obsolescence.
Is it because of the compaction of the soil?
With Norway maple, it's genetic.
Okay.
It's known for having girdling roots.
But-
There are other trees that just as roots, just like the above ground parts can start rubbing and growing against and we prune those off if we can. Most people don't do any root pruning. And you get some kind of overlapping of roots and they start to both grow in diameter and the noose just tightens over time.
Are you supposed to cut those?
Early on in a root's life, if you've got something about the size of a finger and you see it coming around the trunk of your tree, you could just take an axe and just cut it. You don't have to remove it. Just cut that so it doesn't cause a girdling point for the tree. Because they are opportunistic as how they're growing and where they're growing.
But this will shorten the tree's life.
Oh, most definitely. That tree's gone already. Oh, no, you're fine.
We have two old American beech that are easily 4 years old that I know of, and the roots are very girdling. Does that mean that it's headed for disaster, or should we do something?
Well, and disaster may be another 40 years from now.
When I'm dead and I don't care anymore.
Oh, no, just like at home, those words never came out of my mouth. But that's where it's worth having it inspected by either a certified arborist or a licensed tree expert. There are two credentials in the state. There's the ISA certification, the International Society of Arboriculture, and they have a certified arborist and a board certified master arborist designation. And then also in New Jersey by state law, we have a licensed tree expert. And you could hire a licensed tree expert or call them to come and assess the issue and the health and longevity of the tree.
But the girdling means the tree is dying slowly?
Well, slowly, yes. So think about never taking your belt off since you were 6.
Yeah.
Maybe by age 8 or 9, you'd notice a problem. But with trees, it may take a little bit longer. Because think about the entire root system underground. It's not all being girdled at the same time. So that section may die off while another section is doing just fine.
And that's the section near the driveway in our house, which I see this is near the sidewalk. So is that why it's girdling on that side?
No, I'm not sure why. Yeah, it is a maple. But the two don't have a cause and effect in this photo. But yeah, having your trees inspected, or taking digital photos or your camera or your phone, on your phone, don't rely on your memory. Most people do, and it just rained yesterday, so the drought should be over today. It's not the way it works. Those kinds of things. Yeah. Yes.
So as a homeowner, could you do anything in this particular situation yourself to help reduce the girdling?
If they were, well, you could with an axe or a hatchet. I would recommend doing it when the roots were smaller, so you're doing less harm. You are going to be, even pruning, you're wounding the tree on purpose. You're just doing it in a way that it's going to seal up the damage. In these instances, that damage is not going to be sealed up. So if you can catch it early on in the tree's life, in the root's life, and above ground, there are girdling that will occur below ground that you'll never see until you see that the trunk goes straight into the ground on one side and has a nice flare on the other. Something's girdling it over here. You're not going to dig down and find it. That's that's usually with Norway maple. You'll see something going straight into the ground on one side and a flare on the other.
So this one is really too late to do any correction?
Yes. And then if it wasn't for some other construction, this tree probably would have lasted another 10 or 15 years. But again, property use being what it is, that was an easy decision, you know, it had to come down. But it's not a death knell, next week it's gonna be dead. But it's something to be cognizant of and look for, especially with smaller roots. And 15, 20-year-old trees could easily have a small root that you can easily sever and avoid this kind of problem down the road. Yes.
Well, if you look beyond that, you can see that the trees beyond there are diseased.
Oh, it's not a healthy landscape.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a funeral home. They don't worry about that.
Everything's dead.
It's a theme. Wow.
My question is just, I see this a lot, not the girdling so much, but when trees, these at the age, and we're seeing a lot of this dirt erosion in my town in particular, but in general, should that be addressed or just leave those roots exposed? Because the soil's erosion, it runs across the sidewalks and that kind of.
Yeah, you would leave it as, I mean, you've seen trees, I'm sure, between curb and sidewalk where it's just a mound of roots.
Right, yeah, right.
High above the sidewalk. You just leave it.
So there's no, yeah.
There's no reason to, you know, like in a homeowner, I had so many clients who would say, well, how much soil do I have to bring in to cover up the roots?
Right.
Or how much soil can I put over the roots before it's a problem? So, you know, it's a shallow rooted tree. It's a highly compacted soil area. Do you really need to have lawn under it? You know, in a backyard setting, could that be a shade garden? Could that be a rock garden? Could that be something else besides lawn? And if you want lawn, you know, you may have to, well, then the tree has to go. Is this too much shade, too much soil, too much root competition, et cetera?
So, yeah.
Yes.
We gotta put the questions back because we're running late to begin with. So.
We're still on page one.
What page are we on?
2.
2 out of.
Quite a few.
You know, Diane, the same thing happened last year. But at what time do we take a break?
You might go to.
Let's take a break and we're gonna come back, no more questions. No more.
There you go.
Okay.
She's laying the law.
She who must be obeyed.
It's true though.
Oh, wait, I can't come across.
Oh, here, I'm coming.
I'm moving.
Can I just lift it? I want to ask you a question of that, since I can't ask it in class, which is fine, no, we gotta get the information.
Yeah, I missed it.
Tree that's large like that with a flare. However, you do anything. And I know that I can't. Go away from the beach, and then like a foot or two away from the beach, on the water that high across the beach. The rest of it.
Bark mulch is better than shredded beans.
Shredded is shredded.
So I want to do that.
Oh, root mulch. How deep do you have to put the roots? Oh.
Yeah, just different.
So what you could do before that, if you can take it to soil water. Really fine, you know, not dust gravel, but, you know, not big gravel. Or actually something to do is put PVC pipe. If you're doing 2-inch diameter water, 2-inch PVC pipe with some holes in it. And you put that in the hole, in the ground, with like a little rain cover. At least there's an option to do that.
Okay, because the rest of the roots will take over.
Well, they will eventually. I mean, they're all gonna help. You're only doing it in one area, not the whole, not all the way around.
All the way around.
Right.
I'm not doing it out by the canopy, I'm just doing the section.
Gotcha. Yeah, so just do it in that section. Yes.
Okay, all right. We just gotta keep going. That's why I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. Well, there's some things that I've already talked about.
Slides.
Quick, slides.
Okay. Well, we just, you know, we always have an issue with your finishing, so.
Well, Rich went so far, one time was to say to the audience, Nick didn't give me enough time in the program to finish my talk.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
You showed up with 300 slides.
Yeah, and how long did he talk about the Grateful Dead during his time?
40 bike ride.
Yeah, yeah.
I have one.
Oh,
sure.
So I
I'm sorry, your name is
have, in
walking
my
out there.
backyard, which isn't very big,
So, but you're doing just.
they have two large,
Because when,
which I'm keeping. Everybody else is
oh, no, you gotta change it.
but I'm keeping
No.
mine.
Okay.
They are, but you know, you say the plant,
Nice to tell you.
I do have soil production problems, I have a lot of moss in my ground. I do have some.
All right, yeah. Big homework if anybody has some. Thank you.
But if I try to extend that bed, I don't, it doesn't feel like I can, like how far out? He said I can put things underneath the tree, but where? I mean, how far out do I have to go to find the space to do it? Because there is a lot of room. You got any advice? I mean, because, you know, I wouldn't mind having better protection and lawn.
Right, right.
You know, how far out do I have to go? I mean, to establish a bed under the tree.
Oh, you don't have roots in the surface roots are not in your way?
The surface, there are definite.
Oh, but then it's not just separate out, you have pockets of soil. And so you can connect.
Just that, yeah.
I'm not sure. I don't know if
No, I do not have a lot of dirt pressure where I am, I mean, it could happen, but, you know, in terms of putting shrubs. I don't
People
know.
have already established.
Just small-
You have to-
I'm thinking that's why I was asking about too. Okay, that's fine.
I'll do all of it,
Okay.
yeah,
So something that,
but I can just find those little things to try to create whatever
You
pad
could
I
charge a
find.
higher price.
right, I mean, you can add a little soil to it, but eventually that's gonna either wash away or blow away. And then you're left with still just a workable space to keep roots.
So it gives me.
You're welcome.
Jason Lugar. Mark Sabrina. Mark Sabrina. I used to work at Penn.
Oh, nice.
Managed facilities. I manage facility building. I'm more of a building guy. I had stuff outside, those guys. As far as putting stuff around before construction. I used to tell the contractor, it's a career altering decision if you go inside that.
That's exactly right.
Have that,
You're not gonna bid here
fight
anymore either.
Yeah.
have that screen in front of the main.
I was wondering. No.
Administrative.
I gave out.
Pen, sprig, the pen tree.
You're like,
So you don't need somebody, you want a fact that you driving around.
In our camp, we're lucky.
Yeah, that's the thing.
We have our own reasons.
It's been going on a long time. Well, same thing like with the park.
Yeah.
You can do whatever you can.
There's interns and kids that are into all that stuff.
Grant program.
Labeling stuff, there's budgets. But 150 a year? Yeah.
you start.
I have another question. Expertise. I live in Surf City, Chicago.
For lunch?
I'm looking for a tree in a, you showed those medians with those,
Yes, the Japanese tree lilacs.
yes, so way back, 15, 20 years ago, a gentleman from our town,
I didn't drink much.
the Tax Payers Association, I helped. Hybrid poplar, I think you called them, some kind of poplar. I don't know, they're in big decline now.
Yeah.
But that super sandy, compacted soil, so half is blocked from the bay, a high water table. We did that and a holly in the middle.
Okay.
But tree, you know.
Oh, you didn't put a tree front on, you put a smaller holly?
American holly in the base They've been about 10 years. Fried.
And then what about, is there a black pine or Japanese?
We do that off
I
the,
mean, it's very driftwood looking.
yeah. They got decimated last couple of years on the island. For a tree. Rough
So,
leaves,
pitch
shade.
pine, we do well.
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So you want something to.
Not a conference.
I was planning on going Saturday.
Under the lake,
Pine does well.
Actually, we can have it some,
Always clean.
17,
But
sounds like.
that's not an issue.
Yeah.
Because it'll drop the leaves.
Fuzzies.
The bark will slough off. in August.
Had one of my first houses.
Okay. But Cape May is. Playing like crazy. And not sure how available it is. in the market, But they used to, they planted it quite stretch.
Yeah, Columbus has some tree farms.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
They would have.
Like,
Is there a shade commission?
square mile.
Oh, so in the county?
Well, the county owns it, so I'm doing, that's my next stop.
Because they may have a list of.
Right.
Most towns that counties would have that versus a police plan list.
Yeah.
Don't.
I'm actually going to approach the county property now. They dedicated it to the county, so.
And.
Well, they do the lollipop thing. They trim everything up to like the.
So when the plane can handle it,
Right.
they do that kind of pulling out in the where they call it or branches, so it looks like a fist.
Right.
And the little branches just come out. And it can handle hard pulling.
Okay.
But it'll be, it'll be rocky.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
All right, well, I'll do it as soon
Feet high, and it has that one.
There it is.
Show here.
Now start. Soil revitalization. It's like it into the. Oh, organic.
Yeah, organic.
Aesthetic.
That, I know it's a real. That's.
Yeah.
But it's doing well.
Except for the other.
First house was just a big city.
If you made, well,
I don't want to cut that branch and just like,
You know.
Right. Right.
Make it in the sky. That's what I
Even if you slice it a little bit, it's not gonna, well, it'll prevent some. Good. Really cook the whole thing. And what's on these slides there, you could be exposed. That's it. Like seal up the dash. If you're smaller, I'd say, yeah. All right, I'm moving along.
In this compost, they did about making compost feed. Started. And they were
Okay.
So, can I get you any? I know, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. Right. Yeah, go. I got
Oh, wow. I know they don't. No, they don't. Compost. Yeah, my son has. It takes a while. That's right. Yeah. So it takes like 6 months. But it's a good idea. It can't hurt. Right. Throwing it out. It's a big premise of compost. Landfill. Yeah. So 2035. Yeah, it's that is property.
We have.
Look at those two passes on the way up. On the. Up to 100. I thought where I got off, there's probably 15 of them, right?
Somebody, it's probably in house, yeah. Also, if you do Allentown, like Allentown, New Jersey, there's,
That's right down the street, that's 195.
yeah, that's why I was
They're
like.
putting up more greenhouses.
They're doing great jobs.
They're huge.
Yeah.
They just put like 12 green.
One on 539 now. I understand, it's like above Blue Seal. It's like 3 or 4 houses.
Yes. There's also a gentleman that's doing, I think it's on 539,
Okay. Like in a mulch volcano. My right, on 72 on the way home, Tuesday afternoon. Every single one. I mean, literally, they're like a 4.5 high.
Yeah, that's what I think is, you were talking about,
Yeah.
Okay, now I get it.
Pear trees, all these interchanges, pear trees.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, coming off the right, because I came up with.
And the barberry and the wild roses and the pines. And the woodworks. You see it.
So, it's something that
I see those.
I'm like, I mean, you get cold. It's like literally, but I do, you know. And here's. Oh, that's it.
That's all everybody's house. That is. Stockade fence or chain link. And they want a noise fence, at least somebody, I mean. When it snows on that, it's basically.
You're in control.
I think it was just for the class. Yeah, somehow I get.
I was going down to my mom's
birthday. Sorry about the words.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the largest,
There you go.
Shot.
Last year.
Oh, I looked up the liquid aerator. They use it mostly for lawns. And a lot of people say it's
All right, so
just,
Nick
it
said
lets
he will be able
moisture
to get
seep
through
deeper.
it all,
It doesn't actually aerate.
but we need your help, and he will be here afterwards for questions and comments. And if you know, any personal issues, you can.
If you have personal issues.
No personal issues.
Personal treat.
Wow. Wow.
I got a list for you.
All right. Sorry, look at the time, gotta go.
All right. Are you here all week?
Try the veal. Yeah, not the liver. All right, so we're gonna speed learn,
Okay.
because we're done at 12, well, we didn't start at 9:30, sorry about that.
12:30.
12:30 we end? Okay, bye.
Yeah, right.
So a good rooting system, like this tree, that used to be in my neighbor's backyard, we lost 2 big trees in the span of 3 years. So now we have no shade. But you can see where the flare is pretty noticeable. It's like fingers going into the ground. It's really healthy root system. Now, if someone brought this picture to you to a helpline, what would be your concern? What about the sprouting? What does, should those sprouts be there?
No.
What is that telling you?
To me, it's mechanical
It's not borer, it's not mechanical damage. Think about your, ooh, who said stress?
All of us.
A lot of people.
I'm trying to keep quiet.
Good answer, all of us, very good. So think about your botany class. And they talked about apical dominance, where the growing tips have control hormonally over the dormant buds lower on the tree or lower on the plant. Well, if those growing tips are not actively growing and the hormone balance in the tree is off, you're going to get dormant buds released that normally shouldn't have been released. So the tree is telling you, even though you only see the foot of the tree, you don't see the entire canopy, you don't see the entire patient, that can tell you that the tree is struggling, or is it maybe in the beginning of decline because those sprouts, those dormant buds were released that never should have been in a good growing condition. So the tree may be, as we used to say in forestry, we still do say actually, over mature. It's beyond its active, positive trajectory of growing and living, and it's now starting to peak and come back down a little bit. So, and some things to watch out for when you're, when you're working the helpline, if someone's asking you about the grass, but you notice something wrong with the tree. And then bark will not thicken up for a number of years after you plant that tree. And some trees are going to be thin barked, just like they're shallow rooted for the rest of their life. It's the nature of the tree. So if you're expecting, shagbark hickory or Japanese maple or beech or sweet gum or oak, all those trees, yes, will have different bark as they age, but initially they're all thin barked. Every tree starts as a thin bark tree. So just like you protect your skin with all kinds of salves or with sunscreen, how do you protect that young, early bark when you plant that tree? You usually have craft paper wrapped around the trunk of the tree for the first couple of winters, first couple of years of its life, so you can avoid sun scald, frost cracks, and other damage from the sun that is impacting that young trunk. In this picture, the one toward the center of the slide, every tree down this block had the same damage on the same side of every tree. Because when they were planted, they never wrapped the trunk of the tree with craft paper or some sort of thin burlap, if you will, to protect that from the sun. And so it warms up, especially the southwest facing side of the tree. We'll get more winter sun during those winter days. The bark warms up during the day, it cools dramatically at night, a small crack can form, and then over time, that crack continues to grow, the tree grows in diameter, and now you've got the beginnings of what will probably be a hollow spot of that tree later on in its life. Because you've got callus or wound wood, this bulge that's right along the edge of the damaged area. The tree doesn't heal like we do. The tree seals the damage in place. So this damage will be sealed within this tree for the rest of its life, however long or short that life may be. So if you can protect that thin bark with 2 minutes and $5 worth of craft paper, it should be in the bid specs, should be in the job specs, that not only is it going to be staked if needed, but it's definitely going to have the thin bark wrapped and protected. And then, of course, deer rubs, that's the other damage that's there. A lot of places have resorted to fencing. They've resorted to buying corrugated French drain lines and slicing them and then putting them around the tree. Aesthetically, it looks horrible, but it takes the damage of the buck rub instead of ruining the bark of the tree. Because what's inside the bark? The cambium, the xylem, all the plumbing of the tree is right inside the bark. So if you're going to have damaged bark, you're going to have damaged or dead cambium, and the tree's got to work some other way. The plumbing's got to work a different way to get the nutrients up and down to the canopy and to the roots. And then when you're dealing with the public, everybody knows 5 or 6 trees. You know, it's oaks, maybe it's maples, it's sweet gum, and anything nuisance fruit wise. And then everything else is a Christmas tree. They call you up in June, they have a problem with their Christmas tree, and you want to know, well, did you unplug it? Did you take the tinsel off? Well, you know, they're talking about conifers. But one question you can ask that will gain a little bit of connection with the caller or the person at the desk, you just ask long needles or short. They say short needles. Okay, we're talking spruces or firs. We can forget about pines and we can just talk about spruces and firs, and then we can go on to more, you know, so it's an easy question they can answer without any horticultural knowledge whatsoever. And they feel a little bit more empowered to discuss what's wrong with their spruce or their fir, as opposed to just a Christmas tree. There was talk at the break about London plane trees. London plane is a phenomenal tree, incredibly wide planted, probably in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, everywhere from Hoboken, Jersey City, Bayonne, West New York, all the way down to Camden, to Trenton, to Atlantic City, to Cape May. You probably find it in probably every municipality of New Jersey. It is a multi-season dropper. You'll always be cleaning up under this tree. It's dropping fruit, it's dropping big leaves, it's dropping twigs, and in August and September, it sloughs off big bark, big flakes of bark, which is normal. That's supposed to, and it's a cross between the American sycamore and the Chinese sycamore. And so London plane is very well suited for an urban environment. It's well suited for a lot of environments. And the one big advantage it has over other trees, it has chlorophyll in its bark. It can photosynthesize any day of the year over 40 degrees, even without any leaves. So this tree, which American sycamore is pretty noticeable, you drive along and this very white, chalky, big tree. These guys look more like camouflage, like army camouflage, greens and browns, and that's the chlorophyll that's in the bark. And so most plants over 40 degrees will start to photosynthesize. This tree can do it without leaves. So in Jersey City, in places as urban forest unfriendly as you could think of, this tree would lose leaves middle of the year because of either anthracnose disease or sycamore tussock moth or any of these other leaf chewing insects, be totally defoliated and photosynthesize and send out a second set of leaves every year and still do just fine. Because it's got all this bark space that can photosynthesize as well. So it's just a really unique, cool tree that can help itself in the most, tough environments. We talked about growth rings already, so I'm not going to talk about this because we talked about counting rings, and you can all become dendrochronologists, which is basically you count rings, but it sounds better. And then when it comes to pollination, sex in trees, most people are familiar with planting pollinator pair like a male and female holly. They actually sell them in pairs now, so you can get the exact berry quality that you want. And then, 10 to 15% of the resources are usually spent in reproduction, but you put that tree between curb and sidewalk under stress near the end of its life, girdling roots, bad growing conditions, and now it's like 50% or more resources are going to reproduction. I had 2 Norway maples in front of my house that sounds very dark. I watched them slowly die over 5 years because of girdling roots and age. And the leaves came out later every spring and went into full color earlier every year. The leaves got smaller, the leaves got fewer, the leaves got less green. But these 2 trees were pumping out seed like crazy. It was actually producing seed before the first set of leaves was out in the spring. And so we've got nuts, we know about nuts, acorns, we got berries. So what's left? What are these samaras?
Oh, they're from the maples.
Maples,
The winged.
the whirligigs are the winged helicopters that come raining down, double winged or single winged. So it's maples, it's lindens, it's ash. There's a bunch of different trees that produce samaras that are wind dependent for dispersal.
You can sit. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It's hard, isn't it?
So now that we know a little bit about anatomy and physiology, why do we put these plants in as hostile an environment as we do? And then expect them to do well? Aesthetics, it's what we do. It's what we've always done. Is that a reason to do? But we do it because we've always put trees between curb and sidewalk. Why were the trees between curb and sidewalk? To protect the pedestrians from vehicular, trucks or horse and drawn buggies or whatever it was. Do we have pedestrians anymore? People walk anywhere. Or can you put the trees inside the sidewalk? And does that put the pedestrian more at risk? And why do some towns can do that and some towns can't do that? Simply because of your easement and where the town has rights to plant a tree and where they don't. And we've had homeowners call up complaining because they came home and the county planted a tree in their lawn. Well, the easement went up to there and that's where they can plant it. They didn't trespass, that's their easement. We spend a lot of time on biologicals when really that's the bottom of the list. We're trying to control insects and diseases when we create the environment, the opportunity for those insects and diseases to attack the trees, to attack the plants. We overplant, we plant the same thing, we plant them improperly, they're all stressed out. And just like us, when we're all stressed out, we're more prone to catching the flu or a cold or something else, bad nutrition, et cetera. We've got all those other things before we get to the biologicals that are causing decline and decay in our trees. So I interspersed some native plants in this talk because I wanted to. And so American holly, when you think about, and I think Sandy Hook has a very noteworthy cluster, a very large native stand of American holly. If you ever get down there to the Fort Hancock area, I think it's in that area. But think about natives down the road, 25 years from now, 50 years from now, North Jersey, all of New Jersey may be in the native range of American holly. And so how do you prepare for planting, resistant to damage from salt spray? It's all these benefits to the native trees that we have. I'm not going to spend too much time on these because you've got every slide or so should have a link like this, the breeding site that we have at Rutgers, looking at different varieties of hollies and breeding them for better landscape aesthetics and things like that. But this is what people want to see when you're planting a holly.
Yeah.
You know, whether it's from habitat or food or wildlife or just aesthetics. But then we get this. How many mistakes can you point out here as a master gardener in training? So do you notice the meatballs in the back?
It's all hot.
Actually, it looks more like a helmet, doesn't it?
Yeah.
The way it's, but so the way we prune things will make them prone to insect or disease issue. What we surround them with. Okay, this is southwest facing part of a hotel, and we've got white stone and all these plants here, and then the holly sort of in between these big windows. Microclimate that you're creating right there, as the stones absorb heat during the day and give it off at night, when does that plant ever relax? When do your trees ever relax when it comes to between curb and sidewalk or planted along a building? And how it transpires and supports itself in the landscape. Who waters their trees? Okay, no shit. But who waters their big trees? Oh, all right, okay. Most people don't. You know, you see the gator bags go up next to the tree. I never see someone come back and refill it. And it just becomes the trees are on their own. We already talked about this.
It's my yard.
Would you want a playground in this environment with this kind of seed? But if you're a county that knows this, you'll go and clean it up on a regular basis so people can use the playground. But there it is. So why do we hate the trees that we love? What causes us to switch that switch from I love the tree to take it down? I can't stand it. Tree, you know, I love when people say the tree got too tall. All right, trees don't spite us for the mistakes that we make. Maybe it outgrew its available space, yes. But you didn't give it enough available space, or it wasn't given that when it was planted years ago. Do people think about hardiness zones or pest resistance, maintenance needs down the road? Or is it just plant it and forget it? Utility problems, growth pattern. Do you want a vase shaped, a globe shaped, a weeping, an upright, and then lifting sidewalks and cracking pavement and making more insurance issues and risk issues. And, you know, all of a sudden the negatives outweigh all the positives. And like in my town, a guy comes by from the town with a measuring stick and checks how far that sidewalk slab has been lifted. And once it's over 4.5 or 5 inches, the tree comes down.
Really?
What about fixing the sidewalk? What about redirecting the side? No one walks in a straight line. We like to meander. Mm-hmm. So, or grind the top of the root if you can. You know, but that's, when you do that though, and I can understand from a town's perspective, you are now drawing more risk to yourself because you worked on that tree. If it falls down, unless it's an act of God, and that's going to be a tough thing to prove.
Grind the concrete, a lip.
Oh, okay,
Lip.
right.
Oh.
Leave the tree.
Well, and there's no rule that says you have to have a flat sidewalk. You can have a ramp up and a ramp down.
Insurance takes half an inch. Anything under half an inch is okay, so grind them.
Grind it, yeah. So there's ways around, not just knee-jerk reaction to take the tree down. We already talked about bare root, containerized and balled and burlap, and how you buy your trees and what you look for when you're going to be planting. Bare root stock, like I said, you can get much larger trees these days, bare root. They're actually developing, they have developed a hydrogel that they can dig out from out west, 6-inch, 8-inch caliber trees, bare root. Use an air spade to get them out of the ground, dip those roots in a hydrogel, ship it across the nation, plant it here, and it's fine. And you don't have to worry about shipping the soil. You don't have to worry about what size root ball because you're getting all of it's bare root stock. And you can plant stuff here that was grown in Oregon because that's a similar soil and a similar hardiness zone, et cetera, for what we have here. Down the road, maybe not, but we'll have to see what happens then. With containerized stock, this is very popular in the state. A lot of our nurseries have gone to containerized because it's not in the ground. If I have an insect or disease move in, I can pull those 2 or 3 containers out, treat them or get rid of them. I don't have to spray the whole lot and then get stuck waiting for that chemical to break down before I ship it out and dig it out. What's the downside of containerized?
Need a lot of water.
You need a lot of water,
Reduces the roots.
reduces the roots, potential for girdling, pot bound.
Temperature.
Temperature, it's black pots, it's gonna absorb the heat.
On a black patty.
More maintenance.
More maintenance. And it's probably not soil. It's probably growing medium in the pot. So when you buy it, you may have to plant it, you may want to treat it like a bare root tree. Because that material in the pot may not be conducive to your home soil. So you take it out of the pot, you ungirdle it, you untwine it, you try to cut the roots or at least break it up so you can get rid of the girdling of the pot boundness if it is pot bound. But then you want to shake off all that growing medium and tease out the roots laterally so you can get it established into your yard as soon as possible and plant it almost as if you would a bare root tree. And then the larger trees come balled and burlap. We already talked about the flare being too deep in the ball, perhaps based on nursery practices. They've done a lot of studies. There's been a lot of concern about the wire baskets and how they will promote girdling roots. And that's been debunked. There is no promotion. The problem is when you have a wire basket, which then also has synthetic burlap, not real burlap. That synthetic burlap will never break down in the soil. So it's like having studs and drywall around your roots. How do they get out established into your yard? So look for the real burlap. The synthetic burlap is pretty obvious to the touch and to the look that it is synthetic. And if you're planting with that, you want to either make a lot of slices in it to get the roots out, or try to snip off the first 2 rows of the wire basket and then remove as much as you can of the synthetic burlap, again, so the roots can get out into your parent material, into your soil.
Nick, why would you want to leave the,
Oh, you want to leave the bottom of the wire basket because it's supporting the integrity of the root ball. You don't want the root ball collapsing on you by removing the entire wire basket. So if you have the space, just by digging a saucer-shaped hole like that, you've aerated the soil around where those roots are going to go and get quicker establishment into your landscape. Wrapping the trunk, like I said, with burlap, with the craft paper, thin layer of craft paper. And then staking is under a lot of research now, because you may only need 1 stake upwind or 1 stake uphill to support that tree. Trees need to move in response to the wind to form a good root system. If you stake that tree in 5 different directions so it can't move at all, it's never going to establish itself well in the landscape. It's not going to have good root system. And then donuts, not volcanoes, right? We're talking about mulch. So this is sad. When you put plaques by trees as a memorial or a remembrance or something, you're putting your additional value is expected to be benefited to all the visitors. And then when you get a phone call that says, what's wrong? Where do you start? I walked around this site. It was like walking on a sponge. It was so over irrigated. It was ridiculous. The lawn was doing great, but it was floating almost as I walked around. Every tree is overwatered. Every tree is in major decline. They're improperly planted. There are mounds of mulch around it, but everyone has a name. So if this is a memorial garden outside of a hospital where I was visiting, I'm glad I'm not one of these family members, because how PO'd would you be? And this is where you're a living plant being expected to produce that kind of benefit, that kind of memorial value to a family or to the location, you want these trees to be in perfect condition almost all the time. And is that even attainable? Unless you have money like Longwood Gardens or some other place where you can just replace things or hire people 24/7 if need be. Most places don't have that. But even the 9/11 memorial planting in New York City, those trees were planted in huge boxes that are, I believe, in Princeton and some other areas. They're still being grown there because they're the replacements for the ones that start to succumb, because they're all hedge maples. And when that was first opened, the first summer, there was a huge outbreak of spider bites. And within 2 weeks, all these trees are browning out. Do you want that at the 9/11 memorial? No. But luckily, the way that was set up, overnight, they could pull out all those trees, put in new ones. You're not going to spray in New York City, and the trees aren't going to green up overnight. But they were able to replace those. But again, if you're planting monoculture, and on top of which you had those high public expectations of perfect, then you better have the infrastructure in place to meet that need. And that's where most of these things fall way short. So I look around and I take some pictures. Rutgers doesn't pay me to take pictures of bad tree care, but it's everywhere. And I have arguments still with landscapers about that twine. In their opinion, that twine will decay and fall apart before it's a problem. No. I've seen real burlap tied in a knot. It's real burlap. The rest of the burlap is decayed and gone, but the knot is around the base of the tree, girdling it off, choking it off. The tree's trying to grow around it. In this instance, yes, that's real sisal, like almost like a hemp fiber type of degradable twine. But how much these days is nylon? That's not going to break down in the soil. You have to cut it. You have to remove it. You have to untie everything around the base of the tree. To the point that I get called on it. Can you tell me if this is good horticultural practices? So you planted a tree in a raised bed in a parking lot. You buried it in mulch, and you tied it to stakes in 3 different directions. Notice the stake on the right is actually bending toward the tree. It is so tightly connected to the tree. How is that going to move in response to the wind? But the bid specs just said 10 oaks, mulched and staked. You didn't even mention any criteria for good planting practices in the bid specs. And then who doesn't come back to take off the stuff? The tree grew around it, but it's ironic in a way that we have the old garden hose to protect the tree from the wire twine, and yet everyone forgot about it for years. And so it's just as bad as if you had not done it at all. And look at all the wire around the cedar stakes. And again, this is curbside. So follow-up, maintenance, that's where we're falling way short. If you want a raised bed, raise the bed first and then plant in it. Don't raise the bed around the tree or around the shrub. If you're going to be over mulching to the point that you're burying the crown of the shrub, that's going to lead to decay, to rot, to lots of habitat for mice and other ground wildlife. So we want this, but we do this. And we expect it. We demand it from our landscapers. Why do we do that? And why has mulch become the newest landscape aesthetic? I want orange, I want red, I want black, I want blue, I want purple. The shrubs were supposed to give you those colors seasonally, but now we want the mulch to give it to us year round. And so we have all this colorized mulch. We have landscapers who literally, they said to my face, I don't do this. But if the homeowner demands it and I'm going to lose the job, I'll do it. It's like, okay, so you have ethics until you don't. I mean, there's sometimes you have to walk away from the job or train the homeowner, educate the homeowner on why that's wrong. But they see everyone else in the neighborhood, everything is mulched. Fire hydrants are mulched. If you stood there long enough, they would mulch you. What's going on? Why are we doing this to our plants? You know, you're spending $600 on a tree. You're spending maybe $150 on the whole. Why are you screwing it up with $20 of mulch? You don't need that much. You know, we've said in Rutgers for decades, 2 to 3 inches of mulch. Not every year, max. You can take old mulch, rake it up, it smells and looks new, and you've just saved yourself a whole bunch of time and money.
Which is it for?
Here's my three amigos slide. We have a weeping white pine on the left, a Colorado blue spruce on the right, and a native flowering dogwood in the center. Like they said in PBS, which of these three just doesn't belong here? And all of them. What do you think?
The two on the left.
Why the two on the left? There's three.
I like the one
Which-
on the right.
You like the, the Colorado blue spruce, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah. All right, so you would take the middle and the left out.
Yeah.
Okay. And then who said dogwood? Okay, why not the dogwood? Why would you take the dogwood out?
Understory tree.
It's an understory tree. That's right.
Deciduous versus conifer. Deciduous.
Deciduous, well, yeah, it is the only deciduous, that's right. But a native flowering dogwood is an understory tree that does best in part sun, part shade. It usually flowers out before the trees above it leaf out and give it shade for the rest of the year. Where's the shade for this one coming from? If a plant in general does well in part sun, part shade, well, I'll just put it in full sun, it'll do better. No, it does best where it does best. So in this instance, again, too much full sun, the conifers are doing famously. They love full sun, not the native flowering dogwood. And then you've got competition with the shrubs, you've got competition with a hardscape, and then a little square on the dogwood, you still plant with something else for competition. And it's like, how is that dogwood gonna not get insect and disease problems that the conifers won't get because they're planted, maybe not the weeping white pine, that's my cousin it tree, but it's the Colorado blue spruce was really doing quite well in that location and in that setting. So knowing what your plants need and how you can deliver on that should determine which trees you're actually considering for your lawn and landscape. Why are these here? All of our towns have building codes that say for every linear foot of curbing that goes into a construction site, there is a calculation for how many trees and shrubs have to be planted. It doesn't matter that they're planted too close together, that they're not going to sustain themselves, that they're going to be dead in 5 years. It doesn't matter. All that matters is I have to meet the bid specs and the bond specs so I can get my bond back after I finish construction. So all these developments that went in where they took out all the trees, they put in all the construction, and then they overplant is because of that calculation in your building department, in your building and zoning codes. So your shade tree commission may not even know about the requirements that, yes, it has to be planted so densely like that, because I have to meet the bond specs. And so I get a lot of, I see that it's a disease of mine. I guess I should say that, hi, I'm Nick, I'm a recovering arborist, because I see all the mistakes out there. The family loves the view shed and the landscape and everything, and I'm looking at all the tree mistakes. But it's one part of the government not talking to the other part of the government to say, do we really need that kind of calculation anymore? Does it make any sense? Because then when we get into overplanting of the same tree, which is, it's a beautiful shot, everyone thinks about, wow, that'd be a great place to live, but every tree is pin oak and every tree has bacterial leaf scorch. And there's nothing to do except expect the trees to die over 10 to 15 year period once they get infected. You could spend a lot of money on injections of oxytetracycline and some other products, but it simply just masks the symptoms. As soon as you stop those annual injections, the symptoms come right back. So it's spread by leafhoppers, which you can't really spray to control leafhoppers. That'd be a ridiculous thing. So we have lots of communities, Moorestown in South Jersey spent in 1 year close to $250,000 taking down big oak trees, all succumbing to bacterial leaf scorch. And all they had were big oak trees. They didn't diversify their urban forest over time to say, okay, maybe 20% of my trees are pin oaks or oaks in general, and 20% are this and 20% are that. So you can have a diversified forest, and then a new insect or disease comes in, not your entire forest is under threat, but 20%. So, and you probably had this in your talk with Buckley.
No, well, I was Buckley this year, and they didn't have Buckley yet.
Oh, but you will, oh, you most definitely will.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry, yes, you guys did, never mind.
Because this is what it looks like. You know, the tree in the background is pretty much fully engulfed in the disease. The one on the foreground right, you can see little flagging, little branches, not little, but they're branches flagging that the disease is making a foothold in that one. And then the one to the left that doesn't have it yet, but this was taken 10 years ago, all 3 trees are gone. And when you get into this kind of situation, like with emerald ash borer and ash trees, Somerset County is an example. They have 10,000 acres in their park system. I don't know, Monmouth County, Ocean County, how many thousands of acres they have.
Lots.
Lots, right. And how do which ones do you choose to pay attention to, and which ones do you just let go to the insect or the disease? Because you're never going to be able to address all those issues. Norway spruce, another native tree that's doing great in the area, and it's really, you know, from a distance ID, it's so once it gets established and is mature, it's got those long branches with the tendrils almost that hang off of it. It's very distinctive in the landscape. You see it quite often. There are diseases, I won't get into it too much. With Cytospora canker killing from the base up, we talked about that before. But what's this? Not the plant. What happened? Disease or not disease? From the white fence. So this is where you become an investigator, a detective, horticulture, NCIS. You know, what happened? Because a disease, if this was a biotic disease, it would be spotty like that oak tree that just started it. Some branches are affected, some are not. This is continuous throughout the entire plant. So then it's okay, it's abiotic. It's not a biological, it's abiotic. What happened? Did somebody spray the fence? Is there a pool to the left that's out of the shot? And somebody dumped, you know, the pool cleaner or the chlorine or whatever it was, you know. You have to ask all these non-plant related questions to find out what actually happened. And so that's where knowing at least where it's biotic or abiotic, just like that short needled or long question, when you look at a sample that you are given, you'll be able to determine at least initially where you're thinking and where is it going for further questions. Because the abiotic diseases are going to be generalized with wilting, yellowing, et cetera, as it sees on the slide. And then you've got off-season stuff that will affect your plants. Who manages, you know, if you're in an HOA, you're in a townhouse community, you know, you don't have to do maintenance anymore. You sold your lawnmower and you didn't hire a lawnmower when you moved in, but who manages that land? How is it managed? Where does this runoff go? And how is it, you know, how is it affecting the other plants that are further downhill to the left as this is draining and washing away? And how much is put down every winter? And who puts it down? And then how do you treat your plants? These two neighbors couldn't figure out. So one of them did the shearing of hemlock and the other one left it, more natural. Of course, the natural side has now died out and that's long gone, but the sheared shrub is still standing today. So it's a matter of how you want to maintain, how you want to manage, and then along those lines, what are the consequences of that management decision, and how resilient will those sheared shrubs be when it comes to hemlock woolly adelgid, scale, or drought? And then are you doing anything to help it, or are you just leaving it to itself? Once again, wrong tree, wrong plant, or wrong place. These spruces are going to get how big? And it's right underneath a light or right next to a building. So again, we're shortchanging ourselves when it comes to long-lived trees. Another PNC Bank parking lot. I don't know if PNC has a thing with trees. Genetic reversion of Alberta spruce. If you're familiar with Alberta spruce, very short needles, very prickly, very, almost like dermatitis when you touch it or rub against it. And then eventually you can get genetic reversion where it's reverting back to one of its parents as a full-blown spruce. That's interesting. So it's not an Alberta spruce anymore. Now it's Norway. And this tree, I just went by here the other day. This is a full engulfed spruce. There's no sign of Alberta on that at all. It's like they planted the wrong tree because it genetically reverted back. That's cool. It's just a neat thing out there.
Does that happen because of stress? Sorry.
It's random. It's very random. And that's genetics, right? Genetics itself is very random. White pine is another example. It's incredibly wide planted. It does very well in a whole bunch of different soils and different pHs and different soil types. Most people are very familiar with white pine, with the needles, and yet we do this. So in a construction site, we're just going to plant white pine because it's easily available, it's easily transplantable, and it gets me out of my bond because I have to plant X number of plants after the construction. And all of these challenges, all these insects, and all these problems, and it's really simply because of stress. You put that tree in that kind of situation, it's just not going to do well. And then insect and diseases, if nothing else, they are opportunistic. They look for habitat that is suitable for them, whether it's humidity for diseases or pruning wounds or other kinds of wounds, or just a tree is under stress to the point that a borer or an adelgid or an aphid will find a home and habitat and then have a population explosion in that plant. What would be your concern here? What's,
I know where this is.
what that is.
It's our parking lot.
Yeah.
That's in Tom's River. What's the problem with these guys? What's that? Not black knot. Black top, I'm sorry. So yes, well, you could say that is the problem of every plant in New Jersey is black top. Or macadam or concrete. But again, look how closely they were planted together next to each other down this median. And you've got deciduous trees above them that are going to give them shade. And again, conifers prefer full sun. So you've got competition on top of competition. And they're just going to thin out and they're not going to look as robust as they once were early on. And they were planted probably very small, maybe 6 feet tall. And it may have been almost like a gumdrop type of planting early on in its life. And now it's all, they're shooting up as fast as they can to get more sun out of competition with each other. And then with the deciduous trees behind them. Same thing here. I get called to this community in Basking Ridge and it's like, what can we do what do we need to spray or fertilize to help these trees? I'm like, one pruning cut. at the base would suffice. Look how much they're growing in response to where the sun could come from, off competition with everyone else and each other. Look how off color they are. There's so much, there's a bark adelgid that will attack pines and other conifers and will feed on the sap right through the bark of the tree. And they're quite an infestation, but it's not about controlling the insect or getting rid of the mulch mounds. It's getting rid of the trees and starting over again. And again, this is another place was so over irrigated, walking around on a sponge. So everything's about the lawn. And I don't know if these were planted years ago because they're blocking this guy's view of this guy's patio or something, but you know, maybe the use of the property has now changed. And they want more playground or more green space, more open space. I don't know. The other thing is your municipalities will have ordinances controlling how many trees you can take down in a given year. Or they have to be certified dead by a licensed tree expert or diseased. Or if it's within a certain distance of your property line, you may need your neighbor's permission to sign off to get that tree taken down. Every municipality, because of home rule, may have a different ordinance in place when it comes to what trees you can plant, what trees you can take down, when you can take down, how many you can take down. I know in Short Hills and Milburn, they were one of the first to have ordinances controlling private property tree care, where it talked about trees near a property line or a number of trees you can take down in a given year. Mountainside had the same thing. And just think of the name of the town, Mountainside. The guy above, at the top of the mountain, takes down all the trees for a better view of the city, and rainfall comes in and just washes down everyone below him. So Mountainside had to pass an ordinance about controlling residential deforestation, because you've got just the way the property is and the topography of the town, they've got to control what's going on private property. And then our newest one, beech leaf disease. I'm sure Rich will talk about this. It's a cool looking disease. It's caused by a nematode, makes these dark stripes in the leaves. It's been spread quite a bit. But Rich will go into this more in detail, I'm sure. Pitch pine is another great native that we have in the state. Anyone visit the Pine Barrens?
Yeah.
And the pygmy forest? No, it's not.
I hear banjos.
No banjos. But the thing with pitch pine, and it is actually found, there's the one, all the way up the coast, even up into Rhode Island, into Maine. And our problem now, well, two things. One is this ecosystem is dependent on fire. These cones will remain closed until a fire comes through, and usually it's a ground fire. They do a lot of controlled burns in the Pine Barrens and in South Jersey to control the amount of fuel, but then also to get these cones to open up and then germinate and then reestablish, or at least have succession within the pitch pine forest. So if we manage fire out of the ecosystem, like they did out west, they tried that, and you had this preponderance of fuel, and now instead of ground fires, you get crown fires and wildfires, and you just can't control them. So with this, that's why you hear about controlled burns every February, March in South Jersey, and then sometimes in August, like a year ago or 2 years ago, there was a forest fire, a wildfire that actually jumped the parkway.
Yeah.
And when it jumps the parkway, now you've got a woodland residential interface where there's a lot more property, a lot more life at stake if that fire jumps the parkway. When it's to the west of the parkway, it's more woodland, and they're trying to withstand it with fire breaks or whatever, backburning, whatever they can do. But that's where we have to manage for fire in that kind of setting. So if you're a community in that area, you gotta be mindful of, and there is fire-wise landscaping for how you can space plant material on in your yard and away from your house. But the big problem now is we have southern pine beetle. We've had it for a number of years, but every winter, our winters were bad enough, cold enough, we would fight back the populations, and then they would take the rest of the next year to come back up the coast. Well, now, they're just pine beetles. They're not southern anymore because we don't have those hard winters anymore. So they're now found all the way up the native range of pitch pine, and emerald ash borer can kill an ash tree untreated in 4 years. Southern pine beetle can kill a pitch pine in 4 months. So now you've got standing dead trees full of pitch.
Oh, God.
Think about the flammability of this forest. And how are we going to manage that? And what is the pioneer species that's going to come in if we start to lose pitch pine? Which could actually be, and there's a whole bunch of websites and about spotting the beetle and things like that. But Virginia pine may be the other native that moves in and replaces pitch pine. It's a great pioneer species. It does quite well in those open environments. And then other pines like shortleaf and loblolly and eastern hemlock, which we use a lot of in our landscapes. So I gave you a bunch of slides about hemlock and what it would look like, but even hemlock woolly adelgid is a problem. It's manageable in the landscape. Now, we just lost one of our tools. The neonicotinoids in New Jersey have been banned as of January of this year. I think it went into effect. You can't even use up what you have in your house. The law is it's banned. There's no phasing out. So if you have anything left over that has a midacloprid or a neonicotinoid as an active ingredient, you have to wait for like your county or your municipality hazard waste disposal day to actually turn it in and get rid of it. Because legally, you're not supposed to be able to even use it. And hemlock woolly adelgid will feed like little Q-tips or snow on the branches. Everyone's a little female underneath that puff, and little crawlers come out from underneath and set up shop and just start to feed on the sap right through the leaf itself and through the stem. And then our newest threat in an urban environment is emerald ash borer. And it's really not that new anymore, but everyone, again, from that perfect urban tree, we were planting ash everywhere. And there are communities in northern Somerset County and Basque Ridge and Bernards that are 100% ash. Every single tree, door to door to door, is an ash. Do you treat them all? Do you take them all down? How do you manage it when you're going to lose 100% of your trees? If you don't treat, they're all dead in 4 years. If you do treat, which ones do you invest in and which ones do you just let go? It's a really hard decision when you're that overplanted in monoculture. The federal government and the state governments have this huge movement and effort on do not move firewood. When you move firewood, you're moving the weeds, the invasive, the insect, the disease that's on the bark or on the leaves or whatever that's still on that wood. There's no such thing as free firewood. That's how Asian longhorn beetle got moved from Manhattan to Amityville, simply by wood being stacked at the curb, and someone picked it up, put it in their car and drove it to their place in Long Island, and then the pest got moved there. So, and I even had an arborist friend of mine that said, oh, well, I just took up a load of firewood to my cabin in Maine. I guess I shouldn't have done that. I guess you shouldn't have. Well, good luck. So back to the street sides, you know, we plant. It's all about conflict management. It really isn't about the plant or the place. How do we manage our conflict? If the place is not suited for plant material, yet we plant plant material, should we avoid the gas lines instead of planting right next to them? Should someone come back? And as this tree grows in diameter, shouldn't they take those inner circles off to allow for the expansion of that tree instead of the grates now coming up like a sidewalk because no one bothered to come back and do any kind of proper maintenance. We talked about this already with sidewalk upheavals. Look at that tree. The first branch off that trunk is above the dormer on the second, third floor, whatever. And that tree is now gone. Again, the sidewalk lifted, it was enough, they already marked it, and it's I coined the phrase, the bullseye disorder. Every town marks trees as need to come down in different ways, but it's so commonplace. And back in the 70s or 80s, I guess I'm dating myself now, shade tree commissions were being disbanded because there was a law, there was a court case that actually found that commission members could be liable for decisions about taking a tree down or not taking a tree down based on sidewalks. So a lot of towns got rid of their commissions and they went for advisory boards. So because if you're a commission, you have ordinance power. If you're an advisory board, you don't. And the environmental commission or the DPW or the park commission or whoever in your town or county decides on tree care would then take that up on themselves. Did you have your pruning talk already?
We have ours Tuesday.
No, we haven't.
Okay, so you'll learn about why this is bad and, staying on the ground, please stay on the ground. If you need to leave the ground, hire someone. The conflict management, do we wait for the noontime sun, find the line on the ground, and that's where we plant the trees? So it's right under the wires all the time. Instead of planting inside the wires or outside the wires if there's space. But we set up conflict all the time and then we complain. Everyone sees this in their town. Now that's the native V for Victory tree. And if you're in Union County with that other tree on the right, half that tree looks great. But when you prune a tree, whether it's to avoid, well, again, what is this? This is a big water pump, and this is all electrified wires. Does electricity and water play well together? No. So BPU standards say clear it by 10 feet. And so the utility companies will come in and line clearance, that's what they're pruning for, to clear the lines. BPU regs, it's not pruning the tree, it's clearing the lines. So there's lots of times there's not really good pruning cuts, or they left a little bit of a stub or something along those lines. But they're paid and regulated to clear the lines because everybody wants that reliable, consistent electrical delivery to keep our lives as we want them. And then in this instance, when we prune like this, whether it's for the lines or not, changing the architecture of your tree and how it responds to the wind, this is going to be torqued and twisted the rest of its life, or however long it's going to stand there. And this tree will actually develop a bulge spiraling down the tree itself. You'll see it outside the trunk because it's holding itself in place. If you ever watch a canopy move in the wind, different parts move at different times, but you've taken half of it away. And so again, more conflict within the tree itself, within the space. The only time I hear people say they butchered my tree is with line clearance. I never hear the word butcher outside of line clearance context. And yet we're continually planting under the wires. So we're setting up future conflict. And then some stuff you can see, some stuff you can't see. Before things all leaf out, inspect the skeleton of your tree. Spend some time with a pair of binoculars, or if it's a small enough tree, spend some time up close and personal. Look for cracks, look for holes. I don't know if you can see the crack that starts here and goes up, I don't know, another 10 feet. I stood there long enough on a windy day to see daylight right through the entire limb, branch, leader. That whole thing had to come off. There's no way to keep that there. Now, in and of itself, is that a hazard?
Yeah.
Depends on what's under it.
It depends on
What's under it?
what's under it. If it's in the woods, maybe it's habitat, maybe it's just nature. Put it over a parking lot on campus, that's a hazard. Well, it depends on how much you like the dean, but but even in this, in the previous slide, you know, things you don't see. This is along a trail where the decay column within the tree itself, there was no outward sign until the tree failed and fell over that there was a problem in the tree. Sometimes there is an outward sign. You'll see mushrooms growing out of the wood itself. There'll be a small hole or a little weeping along the bark of the tree. But most people, unless there's a mushroom, and even then, they may not recognize that that's a problem of decay within the tree. They'll just think it's a mushroom on the tree. But again, so how you open up properties, park commissions and such, they need to be mindful of the tree's conditions in those areas and then how people are going to use the property. What's the risk here? Another tree on campus.
Oh, the split in the middle.
What about the split?
Water will stay there and then it will rot.
This will. The bigger problem is these parallel branches, codominant leaders, we would call them. And as they both grow in diameter, they start pushing against each other. They start including the bark of one into the wood of the other, and this becomes a very weak union right here. And along with the water and the decay and the pressure, this tree can then split apart quite readily. And so we try to avoid codominant branches, leaders. Early on in that tree's life, a pair of hand snips to take one of them off may have been a good thing to do. Now it's just too late. So sometimes it's just the structure of the tree, not how we pruned it, but maybe how it wasn't pruned years ago, that we have to deal with risk and liability. How do we manage? You know, do we remove the person and make it out of, you know, close the area for visitors? Do we move the building? Do we just prune the tree? And then if the decay is even further down, then we may have to take the tree down. So looking at your trees, looking for mushrooms, looking for sawdust during the year, they're on the base of the tree. With emerald ash borer, looking for those, the woodpeckers have learned quite quickly not to peck, but to fleck. And they actually rub the edges of the branch of the trunk. And so you got these flecks of bark all over the base of the ground, at the base of the tree, because the woodpeckers are going after emerald ash borer. So, and it's specific only to ashes, but they've learned really quickly how to feed on them. Tree maintenance, all these different cumulative conflicts, you know, from girdling roots to de-icing salts, to wounds, to soil compaction, to cold injury, to bark tissue, drought, to excessive water. All of these things are impacting our trees. Oops, what happened there?
There you go. That's it. Sorry, that's what I have.
I don't know what I hit. So we're almost there. Cool. So some things you can watch out for that most people don't pay attention to. The smaller chlorotic leaves, the poor summer color. I said earlier about looking at your trees up close and personal now, but then during the year, go down the block and turn around and look at them from a distance. And how do they compare with the other trees in the neighborhood? Are they more green, less green? Is there some dead on the top? Is there something else going on that maybe you need a better inspection with a professional to look at? Lightning in trees, again, with that big water pump, lightning can easily turn a big tree into matchsticks all over your lawn. But there are opportunities out there for lightning protection in trees. Golf courses have done it quite extensively, especially in this one in Baltusrol, up in Springfield, where little lightning rods are installed into the topmost canopy of the tree. With then wires down, cables down along the trunk, along the branches, down to ground, out to a ground rod that's beyond the drip line to get that energy to ground as quick as possible without blowing the tree to bits. It's very expensive, and it requires maintenance because as that tree grows, those leaves will creep above the lightning rod. So you have to go back in the tree and move the lightning rod above the leaf line. So again, very expensive. But if you want to save, if you have a champion tree, a big tree, something that's very noteworthy or historic, it may be worth investing in those trees. You can go online and find the big and heritage trees of New Jersey to find the Monmouth County and Ocean County champions, who nominated, where they are. I mean, literally, there's an address for where to go to see this tree. The homeowner may not appreciate it. A lot of our big trees are actually in Presbyterian cemeteries. Think about the history of the state, and it sort of makes sense. But there are historic trees that mark the first airmail delivery from Pennsylvania to New Jersey, landing in South Jersey. And it's just amazing if you're a history buff and a tree buff, you can spend a lot of time on this website learning about, or even nominating trees in your neighborhood that could be a winner over the ones that are online now. So is there a perfect urban tree? Hopefully that, that answer, that question is wrong, is false. But we've done our best or worst, depending on how you look at it. American chestnuts were everywhere, and chestnut blight came in and took care of that. So we had elms instead, and the Dutch elm disease came in and wiped them out. Even though there are some disease-resistant varieties, and they're trying to reintroduce both a disease-resistant chestnut and disease-resistant elms. And then London plane is everywhere, Norway maple, pin oak, etc. A lot of these, especially Norway maples in general and oaks in general, you could almost split the state in two. When you look at our urban forest and our forest canopy, from New Brunswick north, it's mostly maple, and south is mostly oak. So if you get a maple insect or disease, North Jersey's on, and 70% of our canopy would be maple, 70% is oak. Why aren't we doing everything? There's so many other choices out there. The unfortunate thing I see now is a lot of municipalities have moved to something like ginkgo. If you're familiar with how ginkgo grows, it's a very specimen-looking type of tree. It's not really designed for one after another, after another, after another street side. And I've seen it even in Manville and Bound Brook where it's planted under the wires. And ginkgo has a very dominant center lead. You plant it under wires, someone's going to be topping it pretty soon. And again, it's just, it's not the right tree for the right place, but that's what's being done now in a lot of places. And like with calorie pear, that hit the market in the 80s and 90s, and towns won beautification awards for using the Red Spire and Bradford calorie pears that first on the market. Even though now there's Aristocrat, Chanticleer, White House, all these other varieties, it's still calorie pear. It was supposed to be a fruitless variety until they cross-pollinated with each other, and it turns out there's this little acorn-sized pear that the birds and the squirrels love, and now in a lot of states, it's listed as an invasive species because it's just taken over some areas. So all those pears you see blooming these days along all the highways, they weren't planted by us. They just happen to be pioneer volunteers because of our four-legged and winged friends. So is it the right tree in the right place, or is it the same tree every place? And how do you manage if it's the second? How do you manage your community's trees and the issues that you're going to have? But if you do it right, there are towns who have done it right, and they've got diversity, and they've got big trees and small trees and big leaves and small leaves, and all this community enhancement and all this beautification, and it just feels like a good place to live and a good place to be. And that's where that wellness comes in.
Where's that?
Oh, he's just saying.
Where, I'm just saying in general.
Yeah, I'm just saying.
Where is that? Where is that? Took it so many years ago. Of course, that's a London, so if you're a DPW guy, and this is a London plan, so it's constantly dropping something. But if you're a DPW guy, do you want big leaved trees? Oh wait, I should say, any DPW guys in the room? You gotta know your audience. But if you're a DPW guy, gal, person, that's the first time I did that. Big leaves mean lots of cleanup in the fall, which means a lot of compost, which means a lot of, stormwater issues. I want small leaves like honey locust or Callery pear. It's gonna crinkle up and blow away. I'm not gonna have to worry about big pickup. So a lot of oaks, a lot of maples, a lot of London plane are, when they go, they're being replaced by, I've seen fruitless crabapple, I've seen purple leaf plum, I've seen, all these smaller trees, smaller leaves. Where's the shade coming from? Where is that kind of aesthetic coming from with these smaller trees? So it's, I believe this was somewhere in either Essex or Morris County that I took it, but it could be in any community. Communities in your town, in your areas that are doing it really well. Our newest invasive, Pinus cellulata. I mean, are we that dumb? We know it's a cell tower, but it's even a brown trunk. It's aesthetics, yes, it is. So we've got ponderosa pine all over New Jersey now, over the top of every other tree. But, something from again, to impress your friends now that you're a master gardener and you know everything about everything, you're quoting the American Phytopathological Society and looking at all these different factors when you're analyzing what's going on with the plant. You're asking about the weather, you're asking about the soil, you're asking about when did they power wash the house? What did they do with the runoff, irrigation problems, chemical use, all these different things to learn about what's going on the property, whether it's the trees, the shrubs, the lawn, whatever. Because you can think about whether it's a good home, remember your roots, room to grow, nature and nurture, avoid over seasoning, have a weight loss plan, wear loose clothing, don't drink too much, but drink plenty of fluids. Works for us, works for our plants, works for our trees. If we do it right, I gave you a bunch of resources at the end. These are all good links, I believe. Licensed tree experts, you can search that by name or by license number or by county or town or zip code. Same thing with the ISA. Treesaregood.com. You could again search by zip code for certified arborists if you're looking for a professional or a licensed tree expert, and the heritage of big trees. And then lastly, we have 2 bicentennial trees in New Jersey that were designated as such in 1976 because they were around in 1776. This is up in Morris County, outside of a golf course in Florham Park, East Hanover area, doing famously. So if, again, don't lose that sense of awe and find those big trees and then find out how did this come about? And maybe you can replicate that in your landscape or in your communities. And with that, wow, I got 2 minutes for questions. What would I plant in my yard? I own a 50 by 100 lot.
And
Yeah, so what would you plant?
I planted raised beds. No, well, the London plane was right next door. That is no longer there. That was shade. And the big pin oak was outside my door on the other side. So that's gone. So I have no shade at all. But something small. So I did have one point a filbert, witch hazel. That's different. Filbert. But that succumbed to Eastern filbert blight. There's a Zelkova at the curb, which is doing okay, but that's the town put that in. In the front, it gets quite a bit of shade from other neighbors' trees, and I do have it's doing really well at native flowering dogwood, which is now almost 30 feet tall. So it's doing quite well. And I bought that from Rutgers Gardens when they were having a plant sale. In the back though, I don't know, I also like the fact that I don't have big leaves to clean up anymore. So, yeah, maybe a Stewardia, maybe my wife really loves the cherry blossoms, so maybe a cherry. If there's a certain variety, I'd have to look into it a little more in detail.
How about Japanese bloodgood?
What did you say?
A Japanese maple, like a bloodgood, or
I know it's not needed.
no, it's not, but yeah, maybe.
Serviceberry, maybe.
Yeah, the red leaves would go nice with the red shutters, so that's.
Let's go with red mulch.
No red mulch, no red mulch.
Oxydendron.
Oh, that's cool.
I have one.
Yes.
So I'm Shade Tree Commission.
Okay.
Yeah, so if we're replacing, like you were saying about replacing trees, like I have an oak tree that is dying. It's not gonna, whatever it does, it's not gonna hurt anything. So I'm just gonna leave it.
Right.
But like, we're trying to replace a big shade tree like that.
Leave it there.
Right.
I don't know where to go because of, like you said, all the different diseases that are going on. And it's a lot of.
This might.
Right. Well, how big of an oak is it now?